What's up out there today? So, we got this video pulled up, which we're going to listen to it on Bluetooth so they can't strike us. But this ex-CIA officer, John, however you say his last name. What's up, Jack Rabbit? So I like to listen to these just to kind of get my own perspective, right? I don't believe everything that I'm told, but I'll damn sure listen to what they have to say. But let's see what they got. Hey, Mama. What's up, Kevin? Y'all can hear this okay? You can't hear it? All right, let me try something different then. All right, so that means my mic ain't hooked up. All right, let me go in here and change.
To engage with all of them. And then
what about now?
Be a consensus at some point, at least among most of those countries. And then you come up with a policy. I think that that's not what.
Can you hear it now?
Case. As you know, you've heard the same criticisms that I've heard in the Gulf. The complaints are that they were not consulted as allies. They were just sort of brought along. And I was in Europe a couple of weeks ago and a couple of weeks before that.
Thank you, Jack Rabbit. Every time I shut this computer down, I have to go back in here and hit the resettings again on my mic. I was actually talking through my damn camera. All right, let me start this over.
John, thanks for doing this.
Thanks for the invitation.
So what's up, T-Dan?
I've been trying to figure out how we got into this war with Iran. I think the reporting is clear at this point that there was really nobody at the White House or in the American intelligence community who was telling the president, yeah.
I'm going to tell you now, after I read Trump's post this morning on Truth Social, it sounded like he's just fixing to back out of there. He's just fixing to take off. So to me, what was the point? If you're not going to follow through with what you started, why even kick the hornet's nest to start with? What's up, Smart Mouth? Hey, Shirley.
Right. But he came to that
conclusion.
Reporting for duty. Speculation as to
what's up, Kevin?
But tell us about the process. You're the president. You're trying to figure out what's going to happen if you declare war on this country. How do you find that information? Where does that come from?
Well, I can tell you how President George H.W. Bush did it and how President George W. Bush did it. It's a process.
Right.
You have to formal process. You have to commission estimates from the intelligence community. You commission finished intelligence reports from the CIA's Directorate of Intelligence. You get an idea of what the State Department is thinking about it. You're talking to your secretaries of state and defense, the National Security Advisor. But then, and I think this is even as important, you need to talk to your friends and allies. You need to know what the European countries are saying.
Hell yeah.
And then our Gulf allies, the Arab allies. We really needed to engage with all of them. And then there's going to be a consensus at some point, at least among most of those countries. And then you come up with a policy. I think that that's not what took place in this case. As you know, you've heard the same criticisms that I've heard in the Gulf. The complaints are that they were not consulted as allies. They were just sort of brought along. And I was in Europe a couple of weeks ago and a couple of weeks before that, and I heard the same complaints that they weren't consulted. The only apparent consultation that was taking place was with the Israelis. And the Israelis really, really wanted this to get done.
So why would you, as a practical matter,
Dan?
Because there is this sense, like as an exceptional nation, we don't need anyone's permission
Sure.
to act. But again, not as an ideological matter or a matter of politeness or good form, but as a practical matter before launching a war, why do you need to talk to the Europeans and the Gulf states?
At the very least, you're going to want political cover. You're also going to want to give them an opportunity to come up with plan B for their, let's say, oil or gas needs or transportation needs. You don't want them to be taken by surprise because they're going to resent you in the end.
Right.
And we didn't do that. And they resent us. I'll give you an example. I was in Ireland 2 weeks ago. And at the hotel, they told me I was probably going to have to leave extra early for the airport because they were expecting the largest demonstration in Irish history which took place the next morning. And it was all because of home heating oil prices and gasoline prices. We didn't consult with the Irish or the British or anybody else before launching this thing. They were already.
So, hey, I want to say something to y'all. So what I have noticed though is China outstocked everybody on crude oil, like by 1 billion barrels. How in the fuck did they know? If you don't believe me, go look it up. But I find it curious. How in the hell did they know to stock up so much oil that this conflict was going to happen? Either they have got a spy in the White House or somebody had told them. One of the two. Get my phone locked.
already having problems because of the cutoff of home heating oil coming from Russia because of the Ukraine war. And then this was just doubly difficult for them. And so we figured it out. Gas was $12.50 a gallon. I mean, if you don't have an
gasoline,
$12.50 a gallon, and home heating oil was astronomical to the point where people were just, freezing, and they're blaming us for it. So you want to be able to consult our friends and allies so that they have a chance to come up with a plan to make the hurt on their own people a little bit less severe.
Do you ever wonder how Nectar can offer such an incredible deal for their adjustable bundle? This bundle includes the Nectar mattress.
Ireland is an enemy of Israel's. The prime minister and many cabinet ministers in Israel have said that. They hate Ireland. They hate Europe. They hate Europeans. So do you think that the president's reluctance or failure to bring them into this conversation reflects Israel's priorities?
I hate to say it, but I do actually. I think that the Israelis, look, I understand what a close friend and ally Israel is and always has been. I get it. But
they ain't been that fucking close.
In Israel's best interests rather than in our own best interests. I think this is one of those cases. The Israelis, of course, are going to jump up and down and yell about the Irish and the Spanish and the Italians.
Right.
But we should, let them vent and then do what's in the best interest of the United States. And I feel like we're not really doing that. We're doing Israel's bidding for it.
Hey, how many people feel like they made a mistake for voting for Trump? Just be honest about it. How many people feel that way? I'll be honest with you. I'm feeling that way right now.
But for many, many years, that's true since the formation of the country. Really,
I don't think I'll ever vote again over that shit.
Pressure to help Israel go along with its priorities. But have you seen other instances when you served in government where the United States government put Israel's interests above those of the United States?
No, in fact,
I don't know what he is, smart mouth. To be honest with you,
the Gulf War, the 1990-91 Gulf War, and again in the Iraq War from 2003 onward, we specifically made decisions that were in the best interest of the United States, to the point where the Israelis complained vociferously to us that they wanted us to do A, and instead we did B because B was better for the United States. And, we would say, well, that's
true too, Jack Rabbit.
We have our interests. There's no such thing as permanent friends. There is such a thing as permanent interests. This is our interest, and this is what we're going to do. And that's just it doesn't seem to be the case today. I don't understand how attacking Iran was in U.S. national interests. I fully understand how this was in Israel's interest, and the Israelis have long wanted us to attack Iran and to overthrow the regime in Tehran. I get that. It's in their interests. But I've never believed, I don't think any CIA officer, past or present, believes or has believed that the Iranians were anywhere near a nuclear weapon. They don't have a delivery system that could deliver a nuclear weapon to the United States. And, when you've got two national intelligence estimates, a national intelligence estimate is a sense of the...
My problem with that shit is we gave the shit to them. We gave them the centrifuge to be able to spin the shit up. It's our own fault.
18 organizations within the U.S. intelligence community unanimously concluding that there is no Iranian nuclear weapons program twice, as well as the late...
There's no program.
No program. No. Ayatollah Khamenei issued a fatwa in 2003 declaring it a sin to develop a nuclear weapon. And then the CIA twice said they don't have a nuclear weapons program.
So it's interesting on that question. So the fatwa been in place all these years, more than 20 years. Mm-hmm. We're told simultaneously that Iran is a fanatical, suicidal, homicidal theocracy, totally beyond reason. So besotted are they by their crazy religious views. Mm-hmm. So there's that. But we also can't take the fatwa seriously because it's Iran and they lie all the time.
Right. but sometimes you can take things seriously.
Well, but I mean, it's one or the other. Either
Right.
either it's a country that issues fatwas and takes them seriously, and therefore we should be afraid of them because they're a theocracy, or it's a country that issues fake fatwas because they don't really believe in the idea of a fatwa. Like, what is it?
God forgive me for quoting Hillary Clinton, but I'm going to quote Hillary Clinton. She said when she was Secretary of State that she had come to the realization that Iran was not a theocracy. It was a military dictatorship. There was this theocratic group that sort of sat on the top of the heap,
Sure.
but the day-to-day operation of the country was run by the IRGC.
Yep.
And the IRGC, being a military organization, was going to run the country.
Yeah, Jack Rabbit, I agree with you on that, buddy.
I think we should have addressed it that way. We shouldn't have gotten wrapped around the axle on theocratic issues. We
That's the
shouldn't
only
have been
thing that can
afraid
be
to
done.
engage,
And I honestly-
maybe not even afraid.
Like, I honestly thought that was what was going to happen with the Proud Boys, but we'll see. The only problem with that is anytime you get any kind of organizations together that start grouping together that think like that, they come in and arrest everybody and fuck them up. And I think that was one of the reasons why they let that shit go down on January 6th, was to be able to arrest all of them, to bust it up.
refusing to engage the Iranians. We should have been constantly engaged, whether it was through the Qataris or the Omanis or even the Algerians.
Right.
There were different ways in which we could speak with the Iranians, and we just never bothered. I will add, I do not have rose-colored glasses when thinking about the Iranians. I know what the Iranians have done. The Iranians made an attempt to kill me several decades ago. I haven't forgotten that. I know that they're bad guys. I know that they've carried out terrorist attacks and that they've killed Americans in many of those terrorist attacks. But we're talking single digits over the last several decades. Now, support for Hezbollah in the 80s, the 90s, yes, very bad, very big problem. The Houthis are a little bit of a thorn in our side. The Hamas thing, the CIA was late to the game on the Hamas thing because the analytic judgment for a long time was incorrectly, I might add, that the Iranians are not supporting Hamas because the Iranians are Shia Muslim and Hamas is Sunni Muslim. That was wrong. They were supporting Hamas. I get all that. But again, Hamas has never carried out an anti-American terrorist attack. So was it
They
in
will
US
now.
national interest to attack Iran for supporting Hamas? I think not.
Hamas is designated a terror group in the U.S.
I think just recently it was maybe Trump 1, maybe early Trump 2. I don't recall. But I think, yeah, recently it was designated
But
terrorist.
Hamas has never carried out a terror attack against Americans?
No.
Usa ahora Clean para aumentar el espacio de almacenamiento de tu teléfono. Limpia archivos basura con un solo.
We spend a lot of time talking about Hamas.
Yeah, and the Muslim Brotherhood, which also has never carried out a terrorist attack on Americans.
All right, smart mouth. Have a good day, man.
I'm not for either one, just for the record.
No, nor am I.
But I don't have strong feelings about either one, for the record.
No.
But why do we talk about both so much?
You know, it's been my experience. I first came to this realization when I first joined the CIA. We always have this need.
See, that's where I'm different. I like to try to see both sides, right? You can't just watch one side all the time.
this, Bolshevism.
You have to listen to both sides.
Whether it was, socialism in the 20s and the early 30s, Nazism, legitimately so. But then,
What's up, AR?
the 70s, the 80s, it became Islamism. It's like we always have to have an enemy to rally around.
So the older you get, you realize how fast everything can change. One day everything is fine, it's great, and the next day things are not great at all. That's just the nature of it. But if you're
Get on with it, Tucker. Fuck. Damn it, I clicked off.
realistic about that, you have to think about your family. Something happened.
I had security. I had a translator, Pashto translator. We
What's
still
up,
drive
Dan?
Out into the fields. And sure enough, we stumble on a poppy farmer. And I asked him a very naive question. I said, instead of poppy, why don't you grow things that have 2 growing seasons, like tomatoes or onions or pomegranates? And he goes like this. "Ugh. The Americans told me in 2001 that if I told them where the Arabs were, I could grow all the poppy I wanted." I said, "What Americans told you could grow poppy?" And just as I said the question, my military handler pulls me by the arm and he says, "We're under threat. We have to go back to the base." I never got an answer. We got back into the Jeep and they took me back to the helicopter. I flew back to Bagram. So actually, like out of a movie. So I come back to Washington and I said to the chief investigator, I said, I'm onto something here. This is not good. So I wrote it all up just as I collected it. Well, I had a friend at DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration. And I called him. I said, "Listen, I'm going to send you a paper, eyes only. I just want your thoughts on it before I send it to John Kerry." So he calls me back a couple days later and he says, "Buddy, you're not going to get this paper published, right?" I said, "Why not?" He said, "Afghanistan produces 93% of the world's heroin. Almost all of that heroin goes to Iran and Russia, and we want them to be addicted to heroin. it weakens their societies. And I never got it published. Well, fast forward years later,
That's disgusting.
we've got a fentanyl epidemic in this country. That fentanyl is coming from China and Mexico. They want us to be addicted to fentanyl because it weakens our society. And that's why we're in the predicament that we're in.
So you believe that the U.S. government
That's
allowed
fucking
Russia
crazy.
in Afghanistan in order to weaken Iran and Russia?
I do. And the reason I have come to that conclusion is not because I'm any smarter than anybody else, but do you know how much of the world's heroin was produced in Afghanistan in the last year of Taliban rule, 2000?
Not too much.
Zero. None. They didn't grow any, not only did they not grow any heroin poppy in 2000, they were a net food exporter to Iran and to Pakistan. And as soon as we took over, it was all about the heroin.
So the idea that it's
Exactly,
that's
Kevin.
amazing. That is
Exactly,
amazing
brother.
statistic.
Terrible.
Does anyone in a meeting where these plans are formulated say, we're the United States, like we can't flood other people's countries with heroin? That's just so immoral.
I never sat in a meeting like that. The meetings were all about how do we win? How do we get a leg up? How do we implement the policy that we want whatever country to follow? That was it.
But if you intentionally flood other people's countries with heroin, it's kind of hard to tell yourself you're the good guy. Like that's,
Oh, Tucker, that was something that I struggled with for at least half of my career at the CIA. We're supposed to be the good guys. So why are we doing so much of this? I just never understood it.
and what do you think the answer is?
That is fucking crazy, man.
The answer was that I had stars in my eyes, that I was not fully understanding of realpolitik.
That you're a liberal.
Mhm.
Well, I'm not a liberal at all.
Yeah,
and I find that disgusting. I find it disgusting. I
it's-
don't want my government to be involved in any way in heroin trafficking.
Nor do I.
And I also don't know why Russia's our enemy, but big picture. But even if there was a good reason to have Russia as an enemy, I still wouldn't be for flooding their cities with heroin.
Right after the Russians invaded Ukraine, I was one of 7 journalists, independent journalists, who were invited to lunch with the Russian ambassador in Washington. And what he wanted was our ideas on how the U.S. and Russia could continue to cooperate diplomatically even during a time of war. And I said, I was actually proud of what I said. I went prepared, and I said, the U.S. and Russia have identical interests in counterterrorism, counterproliferation,
Yeah.
and counter-narcotics.
Yeah.
We should never stop cooperating on those 3 issues. And I said, and you know what? There's a 4th thing. I said, Your Excellency, when you arrest a female American basketball player and give her a draconian 10-year sentence for having a little bit of weed oil, it's a bad look. That was the only time he got angry. And he said, do you have any idea how many Russians are in American prisons? 1,500. I know that it's 1,500 because I have to send my staff out to visit them. So if you want to talk about not arresting people, talk to your own government about it. Well, frankly, I would see that as an opportunity.
Yeah.
That's yet another thing on which we should be engaged with the Russian government. And we're not. And it doesn't matter who's in the White House, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican. We just have this idea that the Russians are bad, 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 and we shouldn't be cooperating with them. I'll tell you another thing. My former wife was also a senior CIA officer. And as recently as like 2017, she said to me, the Russians are the gravest threat that the United States has ever faced. And I'm like, what newspapers are you reading? Because I know these people and they want to work with us. They're not going to roll over for us, but they want to be engaged diplomatically.
And
we just
gravest
won't
threat
do
in
it.
what way?
In what way? I would be far more worried about the Chinese
Yeah.
than about the
I'm
Russians.
far more worried about the Mexicans. I mean,
And the Mexicans. I'll tell you another thing too. You know, I actually left the Democratic Party years ago because I thought that it moved too far to the right. The truth is that the ideological spectrum is not a straight line from left to right. It's a circle. And there are a lot of issues on which the right and the left can meet and agree.
yes.
That's where I am. I'm at the point where the circle meets. So some of my friends, some of my former friends won't speak to me because they say I'm far too conservative, that I've gone over to the MAGA and they just don't want to be friends anymore. And that's fine. I don't care because then they weren't real friends anyway. But
That's
But
what
the
I was
issue is-
fixing to say.
I agreed with Donald Trump's policy about building the wall. I lost a lot of friends because of that. And I said, you have to look at it this way. I read the Greek press every single day. I'm relatively recently, a dual US Greek citizen now. And Turkey takes something like €1.5 billion every year to hold economic refugees in camps in Turkey until they can be processed and resettled in places like Germany and Sweden and France, etc. But what the Turks really do is they put them on little boats and they send them to Greece in the middle of the night. The purpose being to crash the Greek
To
economy.
destroy Greece.
Right. So what the Greeks did is they built a wall. And all of a sudden, nobody can cross the border where the wall is. So the Greeks can now focus on the islands and have the Coast Guard intercept these boats that are coming in almost every night. The wall worked. Yes, our border with Mexico is long. Much of the land is just desolate. It's desert. It's wasteland. But the wall works.
Of course. That's why Israel has them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
As the protector of your home, you know the dilemma. You want to be prepared for break-ins, but you also need to keep your firearms.
So just but back to the focus of counterterrorism.
That's crazy.
The focus of the entire U.S. government has been on Islamic extremism, has been on Israel's enemies for over 20 years.
So that's the real reason why they let all them illegals come over here, was to crash our economy. See, I never understood why they let all of them come over here. A lot of people said it was for voting, and it may very well have been, but I could have swore it was for some type of workforce because they were going to do something. And it never worked out that way. I was just kind of naive to it, I guess.
You don't hear any, or you don't see a mobilization of men and money to fight the drug cartels, who are responsible objectively for so many more deaths in our country.
Exactly right.
So does anyone ever bring that up and say, wait a second, we have 100,000 people dying a year because of these?
On the contrary, the CIA has something called it used to be called the Counter Narcotics Center. Now it's called the Crime and Narcotics Center. And that is the graveyard where people's careers go to die. Yeah, the CIA doesn't care about stopping the flow of drugs. They just don't care. You know, this wonderful show on Netflix, Narcos.
Yes.
So in seasons 1 and 2, just as the DEA is going to go in and grab Pablo Escobar or grab the gentleman of Cali, the CIA station chief comes in and just screws the whole thing up. That's in that show because that's what happens in real life. The CIA at the time cared only about communism and stopping communism. And if the drug cartels were going to tell the CIA where the communists were hiding, then the CIA was A-okay with drug cartels. And that attitude has really never changed.
Dive into a world of tranquility as you test out builds and create your perfect tower.
A federal
These
grand
fucking commercials.
TLC was funneling millions to the KKK and neo-Nazi groups.
Why do you think that is? It doesn't make any sense.
It's old think, Tucker. It's old think, where instead of saying our job is to disrupt any threat to the United States.
Yes, that's what I thought the job was.
Mm-hmm. Their view is our job is to disrupt any Islamist, communist, fascist, whatever foreign official challenge to the United States, whether it's governmental or it's an organized terrorist group. They're just not thinking about the cartel.
So it sounds like they're doing what all organizations do ultimately, which is to protect themselves.
Yes, it's all about kingdom building. I will say, I wrote a piece, I don't even remember for whom, when President Trump first declared that the drug cartels would be reclassified as foreign terrorist groups. And everybody was laughing and making fun and how silly this was. I said, no. You're underestimating him. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's not doing this for the PR of naming the cartels as terrorist groups. He's doing it because legally it frees up some agencies' abilities to act unilaterally against the cartels, and it frees up a great deal of money to be used by CIA, NSA, DOD against the cartels. I said, this is a big deal. This is not window dressing.
Did it have any effect?
I think not yet.
Yeah.
Not yet. Frankly, the army of people that we put against terrorism after 9/11 is what we need to do against drugs.
It's hard to think that that could happen now, considering that all resources of government, certainly all attention in government, is focused on this Iran war.
I think that's the most important point. Yes, I agree.
That there's just no bandwidth for anything.
No.
And the demands of a war, especially one that you're losing, which we are, by any real measurement, they're so overwhelming. Like there's no time to think about anything else, correct?
In the 91 Gulf War and in 2003, the State Department initiated this policy called burden sharing. Really what it is was a nice way of saying, we want all of our allies to pay for this. But it worked. The Kuwaitis in 1990, the year that they were invaded by Iraq, for the very first time in their history, they made more from their investments than they made from oil. So they had this bottomless pit of money. They paid for most of the liberation of their own country, but the Europeans also paid. And so it ended up not costing us anything. We went down the burden sharing road again in 2003, and a lot of it came out of our own pockets, but our European and Gulf allies also paid for it. This time, nobody was consulted. And so this is all coming from our own pockets. And I think that's unsustainable over the long term.
To the beginning of it, the president said, well, two things. One, that we destroyed Iran's nuclear program in June. But you're saying that
obliterated it.
That there was no nuclear program.
There was no nuclear program. They had partially enriched uranium, certainly, which under the NPT they're allowed to do. It's subject to United Nations inspection. They were not.
But there was no
violation.
nuclear program in June.
No nuclear weapons program.
So nuclear weapons program, right? So we destroyed the nuclear weapons program, which doesn't exist. But then in February, we were told again that the nuclear weapons program is absolutely real. That the threat is imminent.
Yes.
People go on television on Fox News and say Iran can lob an ICBM into Miami and obliterate the United States.
You know, I'm glad that you brought that up too, because that is also not true. And a lot of people are saying it. The Iranians did something recently that was interesting, in that they took two of their medium range missiles. They stripped them down to the point where it was just the missile and the engine, and that was it. There was nothing inside of them, just to see how much distance they could get. And they made it almost to Diego Garcia, which is far. So if you instead point them toward Europe, yes, without anything inside these
What's up,
missiles,
pimp?
they could reach Western
What's
Europe.
up, info?
That's not a delivery system. That's just smoke and mirrors. They can only go that far if they're completely empty. If you weigh them down with explosives, or God forbid with, nuclear material, even if it's just to make a dirty bomb, they can't get that far. They could get to Cyprus. They could get certainly to Israel and easily to the Arab Gulf countries. But there was no threat to the United States.
So the IC, the American Intel community, those 18 agencies you referred to, did anybody in those agencies say to the president, this is a major threat, the nuclear program in Iran?
The people that I still talk to at the agency say specifically, no.
So that information, that lie, came from Israel?
Yes.
Right. Why would a president believe a foreign intel agency before his own?
I don't know. That's really the $64,000 question. You recall in the first term when President Trump met with Vladimir Putin, he did not take his intelligence people into the meeting with him. Putin took his intelligence people into the meeting with him because the president said he trusted the other side's intelligence people more than he trusted his own. And I get it. I get that he believes that he was under direct threat from, the deep state and the John Brennans of the world. I understand that. But I'm surprised that feeling, that belief has held over all this way into the second term, where you would believe the Israeli information before you would believe your own people's information, especially when you know that the Israelis have a vested interest in you doing their dirty work for them.
What about General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff? So this is someone who I think I know the president likes, certainly speaks well of. He would be informed on this, right? The chairman has a pretty clear readout on what the intelligence is, right?
Yes. I'm glad you brought him up. I wanted to bring him up too. We have some mutual friends. And not only have I never heard a single negative ever about General Kane, I hear only the most superlative things.
Yeah, me too.
That he is the best chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff that the country could hope for right now. But we also hear these leaks into the political press in Washington that he has argued against this war from the very beginning. It was my own experience.
I don't believe that's true.
I hope that I'm right. I hope that I'm right. It was my experience at the CIA that the Joint Chiefs were the last ones to go to war.
Yep.
They were the ones that always argued until the bitter end not to attack Iraq in 2003 because there was no exit strategy. I think that's the problem today. There's no exit strategy. It's easy to invade a country. It's easy to overthrow a government. It's very, very difficult to leave and to leave something that can actually function as a government.
A lot of people hesitate before getting traditional therapies for cholesterol health. They don't want to wind up stuck on.
CIA director should never take.
Hey, fucking commercial, boy.
Hey, Aria, come on.
So I guess we boarded another fucking vessel.
They do, obviously, but they're not supposed to. When George W. Bush was president in his second term, he changed the structure of the PDB, the President's Daily Brief. It used to be, for most of the articles, it would be a paragraph of fact and a paragraph of analysis. He ordered a third paragraph to be added, policy recommendation. And it was like setting the building on fire. Nobody wanted to be responsible for telling the president of the United States what he should do about a policy. That's just not what the CIA was created for. Behind closed doors, of course, they're going to offer advice. When I was there, the Joint Chiefs almost always deferred to the Secretary of Defense, but they were also almost always of one mind. When we attacked Iraq in 2003, there was a very significant split where it was the Office of the Vice President, the Office of the Secretary of Defense, and the NSC that were the pro-war faction.
Right.
And the anti-war faction.
The
political people. Crazy as it sounds. Well, maybe not crazy. CIA, State Department, and Joint Chiefs that were opposed to the war.
I'm not surprised at all. I'm not surprised at all. I will never defend the CIA. However, like Mossad, they're a stakeholder in the country.
Yeah.
It probably shouldn't be, but they are.
Yeah, right.
And so sometimes the voices of restraint come from the people with the, the long-term interest in the state.
I think that's right.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that does not surprise. And I'm not complimenting the CIA.
No,
I
know in the chat I'm going to be accused of being a shill for the CIA, which I'm
fact.
not.
I mean, when the Israelis bombed Doha on September 10th,
Right.
the day before, September 9th, I guess, the day before Charlie Kirk was murdered, that was like a lunatic thing to do, to bomb, one of our closest
Agreed
allies in the
completely.
world. Yeah, it was insane. And Mossad did not participate in that because they thought it was reckless.
Which it was.
Oh, it was bonkers. But so Mossad was a voice of restraint in Israel, which is like hard to get your head around. But does that surprise you?
No, because you always have to consider the potential for blowback, unintended consequences, responses that you haven't fully thought through. Yeah, blowback is a problem.
So what kind of blowback is the United States looking at now that we've killed the religious leader of this country and his family?
Yeah.
We haven't had a problem with Shiite terrorism in the United States during my lifetime or ever.
No.
Are we going to have one now?
I think not, only because it's always been so hard for Iranians or Iranian proxies to get visas to come to the United States. So, these rumors, I think they came from the FBI right after the conflict began, that there's a cell in Honolulu, there's a cell in Detroit. No, there aren't. If there were, you'd just grab them instead.
I was about to say, why are you telling me about cells? Shouldn't you be arresting the cells if they're planning terror?
Exactly. I remember when I was still with the CIA driving down First Avenue in New York, and with two FBI agents, one of them said, "You see that storefront? That's the headquarters of Hezbollah's cell in New York." And I said, "Well, why don't you do something about it? They're a terrorist group."
What did he say?
Taking me on a tour for. Just go kick the door down and grab them if it's a headquarters of Hezbollah's terrorist cell.
Tariff on a motorcycle.
No, they just kept driving.
So what happens? Harley Davidson went to India and built a motorcycle.
They're
plant.
saying that Trump
And now they don't have
signs
to pay tariffs. Same
orders
thing as us.
live. I'd
So
like
what
to
we're
buy.
doing
Trump
is,
accepts Iran's
Literally
offers.
thousands of companies are
ditch
coming into the U.S. Car companies, AI,
Netanyahu.
but more traditionally car
Can
companies. We
anybody
have
tell
so
me if
many
this
car
is an
company
older-
factories under construction or being designed right now, and they're coming from China, they're coming from Mexico, I must tell you, and they're coming from Canada. A lot of them
Escape
coming
Fox
from
News
Canada,
real quick.
but they're
Just to
coming
say.
into our country because they want to build here. And they want to build here for two reasons. Number one, they'd like to be here. And number two, the tariffs are protecting them. And number three, they want to avoid paying tariffs. When they build their cars here, they don't have any tariffs to pay.
Hardee's Prime Rib Experience with a 100% American Angus burger at a not-so-fancy price from My Rewards.
The prime.
After the Minnesota
Fucking
shooting
Hardee's.
last week, the Department of Homeland Security is now awarding more than $100 million to hundreds of faith organizations across the country to help them ramp up security. What's your vision for further protecting religious liberty across the country amid incidents of threats?
Yeah, I
So
don't
religious
think that's
liberty
real.
is so important. And we're talking about every religion now. And we're doing things on that nobody else has ever done. And we're going to be having a big announcement in about 2 weeks on that question. Yeah, please.
On Space Command, sir, are you concerned that people may not be willing to relocate from Colorado to Alabama?
No, I'm not worried. We'll get somebody else.
Colorado.
I mean, the problem with Colorado is they have a very corrupt voting system. I have so many friends in Colorado.
Yeah, this ain't live.
Anytime
That's the
you
only
have-
thing when you watch this Times Now shit, they'll claim shit's happening and that ain't what's going on. You know good and fucking well if they had if Trump had made a deal with Iran that
Like I didn't understand.
that Fox News would
Yeah,
be
but
on it.
I think that the attack on Iran has galvanized the Iranian public. The government was not a house of cards. We are not going to be seen as liberators. We're going to be seen as attackers and possibly occupiers. And I think that's the most immediate challenge we're going to face.
So that, I guess, seems obvious now, 7 weeks in. But at the time, my impression is the president really believed that if you kill the Ayatollah, the whole country collapses.
But coming back to Hillary Clinton, the reason why it didn't is that it's not actually a theocracy. It's a military dictatorship.
Oh, it's actually one of the most liberal countries in the entire
You know
region.
what? It is. I think you and I are the only ones who haven't
People know that.
Yes. And we haven't been to Iran. So many of my friends have been to Iran relatively recently, before the hostilities began. And they posted videos on YouTube of just
What's
walking
up,
down the
Rutz?
street in Tehran. And the restaurants are open and the cafes and there's music and people laughing and having late dinners. And it's just normal life.
Yeah. No, I remember my father working in Iran, going back and forth to Iran and telling me now it's like Tehran specifically.
Yes.
I mean, I think it's a huge country, but Tehran, it's tons of liberals.
Millie Ray.
Yeah. One of the most amazing pictures, I think that's one of the reasons Trump was convinced that the regime would fall, right? Because there were lots of, secular liberals in Tehran.
Yes.
But one of the most amazing pictures I think I've ever seen was a picture of a very butch-looking lesbian-type woman with a nose ring in Tehran, standing at an intersection, waving a photograph of the Ayatollah after he was killed. And the point is, this is exactly the person who opposed him while he was still alive. But now that we've killed him, you got all the lesbians of Tehran are all of a sudden for the Ayatollah.
I think that's exactly right. We've forced them together. We really have. So how, you look at it this way: if I don't like whoever happens to be in the White House, and I go to demonstrations and my fist is in the air, and I don't like this person's policy, and then the Russians attack, I'm going to pick up a gun and I'm going to fight the Russians.
Oh, for sure. No matter who attacks.
No matter who attacks.
Right, but human nature gets suspended.
Pivotal point negotiations with Iran as President Trump is reportedly unhappy with Tehran's latest proposal to open the key shipping route. Lucas Tomlinson joins us live from Dubai with the latest. Lucas, at least there's some movement.
That's right, Brian. A little bit of movement while hundreds of ships remain stuck at anchor in the Persian Gulf. The first liquefied natural gas carrier from right here in the UAE did transit the Strait of Hormuz recently. It's the first LNG carrier to transit the Strait of Hormuz since the beginning of the war 2 months ago. And in an exclusive interview with our own Trey Ying, Secretary of State Marco Rubio weighed in on these latest negotiations with Iran and where things stand.
Reports do indicate Iran has offered to open the straits, but they want to delay conversations about their nuclear program. Would this be acceptable to the Trump administration?
Well, again, I'm not going to speculate about the president's decision-making on this matter. Suffice it to say that the nuclear question is the reason why we're in this in the first place. They don't just seek to dominate Iran, they seek to dominate the region. And imagine that with a nuclear weapon.
And just a reminder of some of President Trump's red lines in these negotiations, Brian: an end to all uranium enrichment, dismantling of all the enrichment facilities, retrieve all that highly enriched uranium from inside Iran, end the funding for terrorist proxies, and fully open the Strait of Hormuz and not charging those tolls. Now, according to the New York Times, Trump is dissatisfied with Iran's plan to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, saying that we have been clear about our red lines. The president will only make a deal that's good for the American people and the world. That's according to the White House. Now, last weekend, President Trump called off the trip of his special envoys, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, to Pakistan to negotiate. The president said Iran can pick up the phone if they want a deal. And with the arrival of the USS George H.W. Bush here in the Middle East, there are now 3 aircraft carrier strike groups in theater, the most since 2003, to enforce the blockade that has been in effect for more than 2 weeks. Now, Iran's storage tanks are nearing capacity, Brian, and some people think it'll reach peak capacity in the next 1 to 3 weeks. And at that point, Iran might have to shut down oil production, which many in the White House think could help in the negotiations. Brian?
There's no doubt it's going to help. Front page of the Wall Street Journal, it looks like they're coming up with crazy finding tankers just to store this oil. If they have to cap the wells are done, and so is their economy. Lucas, thanks so much. And one even more Fox News on you.
Let's see what Mark's talking about.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio sitting down exclusively with Fox, discussing the latest on the Middle East, as well as the ongoing situation in Latin America.
The man who interviewed him, Chief Foreign Correspondent Trey Yingst, joins us now with more. Hey, Trey.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. Secretary of State Marco Rubio indicated that both Israel and Lebanon want peace, but it's the Iran-backed Lebanese militant group Hezbollah that is getting in the way. He said the talks so far between Israel and Lebanon have been successful toward reaching a broader agreement. I asked the secretary about the Israeli buffer zone in southern Lebanon that's putting distance between the citizens of northern Israel and this Iran-backed proxy group.
Hezbollah has routinely launched attacks against Israeli civilians along the border. They have fired thousands of rockets into Israel. Are you open to a scenario where Israel maintains a buffer zone indefinitely?
No, I don't think the Israelis want it indefinitely. I think if you ask the Israelis, they would tell you the perfect outcome is a strong Lebanese government with a strong Lebanese armed forces who is able to dismantle Hezbollah, to prevent them from these attacks and ultimately to make sure that they don't exist anymore as a military unit. That's the ideal outcome that the Israelis want. I think that's what the Lebanese want. I think the problem we face right now in the short term is the Lebanese armed forces, while they may have willingness, do not at this moment have full capability to address all of the threats that are emanating from Hezbollah inside of Lebanon.
The secretary and I also spoke about a variety of other topics, including Iran, China, and Cuba. He called Cuba a failed state and spoke about the national security threats it poses to the United States.
The other thing is it can get better. But in order for it to get better, they do need very substantial and serious economic reforms. Those serious economic reforms are impossible with these people in charge. It can't happen. And these people in charge aren't just economically incompetent. They have rolled out the welcome mat to adversaries of the United States to operate within Cuban territory against our national interest with impunity. We are not going to have a foreign military or intelligence or security apparatus operating with impunity 90 miles off the shores of the United States. That's not going to happen under President Trump.
When it comes to threats against the United States, the secretary also spoke about the issue of Iran, saying the Trump administration
want to make some money right now, invest in Cuba. That's all I can tell you, because that shit there fixing to happen. All right, let's go back and listen to what we was listening to.
For our adversaries, because they're not human beings. So they're not going to behave in ways that we would recognize. They're totally irrational. It's a suicide cult or whatever they're telling you on Fox News. But the point is that you will suspend all rational analysis, and because you can't predict people like that other than they want to kill.
You're right. And when the only analysis that you're getting or paying attention to is from either the Israelis or the MEK, the Mujahideen Khalq, which is really no more than a quasi-communist cult, then you can't rely on the information.
Okay, so can you explain the MEK? So
sure.
there are big allies in Iran, right?
Yeah, which just sends chills up my spine.
Okay, so who are they?
So they were founded by a husband and wife team back in the 60s. And in the 70s, they were based in Iraq, northeastern Iraq, and they would launch these cross-border attacks into Iran. Deep into Iran, like in Tehran, terrorist attacks. They attempted to murder the American ambassador. They attempted to murder a 3-star general who was the senior most American military official in Iran. They've carried out anti-American terrorist attacks over the course of decades.
Anti-American.
And then they switched sides. When Saddam Hussein pushed them out of Iraq, they relocated mostly to Paris.
Yeah.
Now the husband disappeared.
So I guess old Ryan got Chad offbeat spooked.
Yeah.
Only reason I'm gonna play this is because everybody in here fucking knows who Ryan is, so we'll play it. But I guess he's got him spooked.
So I got to figure some stuff out. I got some news I don't know if I can share just yet. I'm trying to find out.
Oh, shit.
So I got to figure some stuff out. I got some news I don't know if I can share just yet. I'm trying to find out what I can do and say. Just stay tuned. So I got to figure some stuff out.
It's about all you gotta say. That's about all you gotta fucking say. Everybody knows what that means. Ain't that fucking crazy? Them NDAs are a motherfucker, ain't they?
That's where the Greek, what became the Greek terrorist groups, 17 November and Popular Revolutionary Struggle, they started in Paris.
That's where Pol Pot started.
Pol Pot studied in Paris.
Yep.
And Karl Marx's daughter married Paul Lafargue, the father of French communism. So Paris is kind of a screwed up place. It can be. Anyway,
if you stand on what you say, then why in the fuck do you got to worry about what somebody else is trying to put out?
Miriam
Bama. Especially if you're the one that said the shit. It's kind of weird, but all right, go for it.
Never to be seen again. The conventional wisdom is that she killed him or had him killed, and she took over the MEK. So in 2009, when Barack Obama is elected president, Hillary Clinton becomes God forbid, becomes Secretary of State. The MEK hires some of the most high-powered lobbyists in Washington to get them off the terrorism list. And they engaged with both Democrats and Republicans. I mean, everybody from Howard Dean to Rudy Giuliani.
Howard Dean was lobbying for MEK?
Oh, yeah. And Rudy Giuliani.
That's pathetic.
You should see the pictures of them together. It's sickening. At these big banquets in Washington to raise money for the
These are the
MEK.
people who tried to kill the U.S. ambassador?
Mm-hmm. But they're the good guys now.
So the weather is warming, which means grilling.
God damn, Tucker, quit trying to sell me something, man. I never, you know, when you flood me with advertisements, I swear, even if I was looking to buy something in that area, I'll never buy that shit just because you flood me with it. Can't stand that.
We
told the Shah to go get cancer.
What's up, Daniel?
That's right. He went to the Bahamas for a while, then to Panama, and then ended up finally settling in Cairo, and he died in Cairo. Well, his family stayed here in the United States, both in Northern Virginia. Well, Reza Pahlavi, the crown prince in Northern Virginia, the mother in North Carolina, and Reza's younger brother in Boston. Reza Pahlavi is not equipped to lead anything. He is a playboy. He had an affair with his brother's wife. His brother actually, his brother turned to drugs and committed suicide. His own wife, Reza Pahlavi's wife, is having a very public affair right now with her personal trainer. The Parisian press is
It's always a personal trainer, ain't it? He getting real personal. He training her up good, boy, let me tell you.
in anybody's culture, let alone in Iranian culture, which is supposed to be very pious and very Muslim. So on top of that, he has said repeatedly, most recently on the Patrick Bet David podcast, that no, he doesn't think he wants to go back to Iran. He's made a life here. He's very wealthy. His kids are Americans. There's really no reason to go back to Iran. Okay, so why are we talking about you then in the first place?
Well, he was all over Mar-a-Lago and the White House.
I'm the guy. And then, well, maybe I'm not the guy. I'm kind of afraid.
So what has he done for the last 47 years?
Nothing. You see him every once in a while at cultural events. You see him every twice a year. Iranian singers will come to Washington, or there will be a Farsi language play, a performance or something, and he'll go to those things. But he's just not a player in Washington. Even in Iranian exile circles, he's just not a player.
So why were we talking about him nonstop all summer?
Because the Israelis like him very much. Remember, his father opened diplomatic relations with Israel. There was an Israeli embassy in Tehran.
Oh, yeah.
And there was an Iranian embassy in Jerusalem. And so I think there are a lot of people who pine for those days and think that, well, in a perfect world, if Reza Pahlavi were Reza Shah, and Israel and Iran would be friends.
Let's see what this Boils and Finance dude got to say.
That most people are not even aware is happening. The U.S. is about to invade Cuba.
We all know that. What are you talking about? Nah, bro, we don't. We don't use oil from over there. And it so has because the highest bidders are outbidding for the oil that's available to us because they need it. And that's why I say if they let them wells crash over there, we're fucked. No matter what people want to believe, I mean, our gas will never come down. If 20% of the oil comes from Iran, then that just means that other countries are going to outbid us for our own oil. And you think these oil executives are going to say, nah, hold on now. Let's save what we got for the American people. Fuck no, they ain't. Hell no, that's bad business. It's not a good business decision.
On April 17th, Donald Trump gave a speech at a Turning Point rally with Erica Kirk at Dream City Church in Phoenix. He said this.
And very soon, this great strength will also bring about a day, 70 years in waiting. It's called A New Dawn for Cuba. We're going to help them out with Cuba. We have a lot of great Cuban Americans. Not too many people in this audience, I don't think, but you go to Miami, we have people, Cuban Americans, people that were brutally treated, whose families were killed and brutalized.
Hey, I don't know if I've ever told y'all this, but at one time, somebody from the government recruited my pops, and some of his buddies to go to Cuba with their shrimp boats and pick people up and bring them back. And do you know when they got back, they fucking arrested a bunch of them and seized a bunch of shrimp boats? If you don't believe me, go look it up. It's crazy. I couldn't hardly believe that when he told me that, but they damn sure did.
Oh, watch what happens.
He says, watch what happens. This is very much the same rhetoric Trump used before he attacked Venezuela. It is the same thing he said before he attacked Iran. I believe the United States is about to invade Cuba. Now, before you leave an angry comment calling me crazy, just remember one thing. On February 22nd, I posted a video on Iran telling you exactly what was going on. That video was posted 1 week before Donald Trump started airstrikes against Iran on February 28th. Now, I don't want to say I told you so. I just don't understand why more people are not watching my videos, because you would have a much better idea about what was going on. Trump's speech in Phoenix is not the only time he has talked about Cuba.
There have been reports that the Pentagon's preparing for military action in Cuba. Are those reports true? Is Cuba next?
Well, it depends on what your definition of military action is.
Would it look like Venezuela or Iran?
No, it really does. It depends on what your definition of military action is, as Bill Clinton would say. You understand that? No, not a lot of people don't understand that.
Trump said this the next day following his speech in Phoenix. They were asking if the Pentagon is preparing for military action. We know that they are preparing for military action because there was a leak from the Pentagon. The leak came out on April 14, 4 days before Trump's speech in Phoenix. The leaks were reported in USA Today, where they claimed they spoke with 2 anonymous sources. They said, the Pentagon said it plans for a range of contingencies and remains prepared to execute the president's orders as directed. It sounds like they are coming up with different plans to invade Cuba, and Donald Trump is going to pick one. Now, if you are familiar with how the Pentagon operates, a lot of times they will leak this information on purpose to try to get the public ready to go to war. Bill Maher has talked about this on his show.
Because of Israel, this is one person's opinion, because of Israel and President Trump's backing Israel, the Middle East is safer than it has been in 20 years.
Absolutely.
Hamas is on its knees, Hezbollah is on its knees.
I gave him credit for that.
Iran no longer looks invincible. And you know who is applauding us every step of the way, not out loud, but the Arab countries.
Look,
every one of them.
If Venezuela causes Cuba to fall, if he somehow gets Venezuela, Cuba, and Iran all to be not these horrible places they were, he should get a Nobel Peace Prize.
YouTube Premium. Is that why the fuck he's doing it? He damn sure talks about that Nobel Peace Prize a lot, don't he?
Uninterrupted.
Bill Maher says that Donald Trump should get the Nobel Peace Prize. I'm starting to wonder if Bill Maher is still a Democrat. Trump continues to talk about Cuba.
Well, we're going to see with Cuba. Cuba's another story. Cuba's been a terribly run country for a long time. It's got a bad system. It's been very oppressive, as you know. And we have a lot of great Cuban Americans, all of whom just about voted for me. And they were treated very badly. In many cases, family members have been killed. They've been beaten up and mugged, and terrible things happened in Cuba. And Cuba's a failing nation. And we're going to do this, and we may stop by Cuba after we're finished with this. But Cuba is a nation that was just been horribly run for many years by Castro.
Something else to keep in mind. A close advisor of Donald Trump is someone named Laura Loomer. She has posted on X.com multiple times about Cuba. Here's a post from February. Cuba is next. Whether you like Laura Loomer or not, you should be paying attention to this. Donald Trump also has, as his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who is from Florida and has relationships with all the Cuban immigrants in Florida who desperately want to overthrow the communist regime in Cuba. These are people who are around Donald Trump, encouraging him to invade Cuba. They've been talking about this for a while. I'm going to show you what Donald Trump said about this in March.
I think Cuba, in its own way, if tourism and everything else, it's a beautiful island, great weather. They're not in a hurricane zone, which is nice for a change. They won't be asking us for money for hurricanes every week. But I think Cuba's seen the end. All my life I've been hearing about the United States and Cuba. When will the United States do it? I do believe I'll be having the honor of Taking Cuba. That'd be good. That's a big honor.
Taking Cuba.
Taking Cuba in some form, yeah. Taking Cuba. I mean, whether I free it, take it, I think I can do anything I want with it. You want to know the truth? They're a very weakened nation right now. They were for a long time. Very violent leaders.
Trump says, I can do anything I want with it. That is his attitude on Cuba. Now, I'm aware that many people are furious about Trump starting wars around the world. This is a direct contradiction to Trump's campaign promise when he said, no new wars.
They're the party of endless wars. I was the first president in decades who started no new war. There were wars all over. He said, bring back Trump. It'll all end. It all ended. We had no problem. And I'm going to keep you out of wars. I kept you out of wars. We had no wars with Donald Trump as your president. Remember when crooked Hillary Clinton used to say, he's going to get us into a war. Look at him. Look at his rhetoric. I said, no, my rhetoric's going to keep us out of wars. That's what happened.
There are so many clips because he made this promise over and over again. No new wars. So I understand why people are upset. But in my opinion, these people need to calm down. Newsflash, sometimes politicians break their promises. That's how politics works. Trump gets into office, and maybe he got new information and realized he had to change his policy. So he broke a little promise. You have to keep it in context. Trump has delivered on a lot of other promises. Many of you have just filed your taxes, and you may have received some of the incredible tax benefits that were passed by Trump. That is a promise he delivered on. I think we have to keep it in context that broken promises are something that happens in politics. Let me remind you of the first George Bush.
And I'm the one who will not raise taxes. My opponent now says he'll raise them as a last resort or a third resort. But when a politician talks like that, you know that's one resort he'll be checking into. And my opponent won't rule out raising taxes, but I will, and the Congress will push me to raise taxes, and I'll say no, and they'll push, and I'll say no, and they'll push again, and I'll say to them, read my lips. No new taxes.
Do you know what he did during his term? He raised taxes. That is a pretty blatant broken promise. Let me remind you of Barack Obama.
Watch baseball all season long. Catch the
They
action
all raise
live
fucking
with
taxes.
YouTube TV. Terms apply. Cancel anytime.
There are a number of different things that you could do early pertaining to executive orders.
Right. What's not
One of them is to shut down Guantanamo Bay. Another is to change interrogation methods that are used by U.S.
Only
troops.
the
Are those things that you
Trump
plan to take early action on?
Yes. I have said repeatedly that I intend to close Guantanamo, and I will follow through on that. I've said repeatedly that America doesn't torture, and I'm going to make sure that we don't torture.
Did Barack Obama shut down Guantanamo Bay? No, that was a broken promise. So Donald Trump made a little promise that he would not start any wars. I think people who are outraged about this need to calm down. Oh no, you are telling me that a politician broke a promise. No, shiver my timbers. That cannot be. You people need to get off your high horse and accept that, yes, a politician sometimes breaks their promise. Donald Trump just changed his mind, and now he has decided that his new strategy is all war all the time. Now, let me just say up front that I am not personally convinced that it is a good idea for the U.S. to invade Cuba. That's my personal opinion. All I am saying is that it is not a good argument to claim that we should not go to war because it would be a broken campaign promise. That is not a good argument. I want to hear arguments based on the issues. Let's look at Cuba. The problem with Cuba has always been that we have a mortal enemy of the United States at our doorstep. That is the problem. Cuba is 90 miles away. So any enemy of the United States could easily sneak a nuclear missile into Cuba and target the US. You are in very real danger right now from any of our enemies launching a strike from Cuba. If we go back to the beginning, Che Guevara and Fidel Castro led a resistance movement in Cuba and toppled the government in 1959. Fidel Castro assumed control and established a communist dictatorship. They formed an alliance with the Communist Soviet Union and Communist China. When John F. Kennedy became president, he approved the Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961, which was an attempt to invade Cuba and overthrow the government. The invasion failed miserably, and John F. Kennedy blamed the intelligence community for the failure. The following year, in 1962, we had the Cuban Missile Crisis, where Russia deployed dozens of nuclear warheads to Cuba. After a 13-day standoff, the nuclear weapons were removed, but we came very close to nuclear war. 2 years later, in 1964, Che Guevara did an interview and said this.
Major Guevara, in your speech to the General Assembly day before yesterday, you accused the United States of helping Cuba's neighbors prepare new aggression against her. We, in turn, have often accused your government of abetting subversion in other Latin American countries. Do you see any way out of this situation, any way to improve relations?
I think with regards to solutions, there are solutions. And I think there is only one. We have said repeatedly to the government of the US that we do not want anything but to forget us, that they do not consider us even for good or evil.
It is really important to understand what is going on. The intelligence community wanted to address this threat with a full-on invasion of Cuba. John F. Kennedy kept holding the intelligence community back. So the intelligence community has been wanting to invade Cuba to address this threat since 1961. When John F. Kennedy refused to do it, he was assassinated in 1963. Now, Donald Trump has been signaling that he is finally going to follow through and take over Cuba, not only for the security reasons, but to address the humanitarian crisis.
55-year-old Laudelina Zulueta is returning home empty-handed after spending hours in a queue to buy butter. Life is a struggle, she says, especially since her daughter migrated to Spain, leaving her to care for her grandchildren on her monthly minimum wage, worth $20 at the black market rate. Agua. She shows us her refrigerator, full, mostly of water.
I have 4 children to feed. I have no choice but to go on the street to sell this and that.
She explains that she can buy 10 packs of cigarettes for 200 pesos on her ration card and sell each one for 150 on the flourishing informal market. Long lines for everything from food to fuel reveal an economy in distress. People's tempers are short from queuing most of the day, in this case for 2 bottles of oil. Scarce items are sold with a ration card, but most things are no longer subsidized.
I've been here since 5 a.m.
I will say this though, them people can go and fish. When you go to like places like the Bahamas and shit, it's nothing to see those people on the beach with having fish cookouts and stuff. So they're only going to show shit that looks real bad, right? They're surrounded by the ocean. I mean, the ocean will feed you.
And I've got number 117. See?
It's now 10 a.m. and there are at least 800 people in line hoping to buy chicken.
Cuba is at its weakest state ever.
Chicken. If you remember
89% of Cubans live in extreme poverty. There are constant blackouts. Most people are starving. 7 out of 10 Cubans skip breakfast, lunch, or dinner because they do not have food. Most Cubans' day-to-day experience is that they are starving every single day. Disapproval of the Cuban government is around 92%. This is the result of communism over 60 years. That is the argument on why Donald Trump should invade Cuba. The Cuban people need our help. The opposing argument on why we should not invade Cuba is coming from the America First crowd. These people suggest that we should completely ignore what is going on in the rest of the world and only focus on domestic issues. I think that's a valid argument, although I personally think it's a little naive. Here's my opinion. World War III is coming. I think Donald Trump is playing 4D chess. I know that people are upset about Trump attacking Iran, but the attacks on Iran are really about Russia and China. If you are complaining about the conflict in Iran and you are not mentioning Russia and China, I think that is intellectually dishonest. Russia and China are planning right now on invading the US. Let me show you a map of all the farmland China has been buying across the United States. All this farmland just happens to be right next to US military bases.
Yeah.
Do you think that is a coincidence?
Nope.
They are preparing to invade us. And if you don't think that is the case, I think you are being naive. Whether Donald Trump attacked Iran or not, World War III is still coming either way. Trump is hurting the ability of Russia and China to attack us by attacking Iran first. If we look at how World War III would play out, the world is split into two groups. You have the allies of the United States, United Kingdom, Europe, and Australia. Then you have the Axis powers of Russia, China, Iran, Venezuela, North Korea, and yes, Cuba. If we do not invade Cuba, we are giving the Axis powers a foothold to launch an attack directly at the United States. I want to go back to what Donald Trump said in 2016. I want you to listen to this carefully because I think this explains a lot about his thought process.
Obviously, the war in Iraq was a big, fat mistake. All right? Now, you can take it any way you want. And it took Jeb Bush, if you remember at the beginning of his announcement, when he announced for president, took him 5 days. He went back. It was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. Took him 5 days before his people told him what to say. And he ultimately said it was a mistake. The war in Iraq, we spent $2 trillion, thousands of lives. We don't even have it. Iran is taking over Iraq with the second largest oil reserves in the world. Obviously, it was a mistake. So George Bush made a mistake. We can make mistakes, but that one was a beauty. We should have never been in Iraq. We have destabilized the Middle East.
But so you still think he should be impeached?
I think it's my turn, isn't it?
You do whatever you want. You call it whatever you want. I want to tell you, they lied.
Okay.
They said there were weapons of mass destruction. There were none, and they knew there were none. There were no weapons of mass destruction.
All right. Governor Bush.
While Donald Trump was building a reality TV show, my brother was building a security apparatus to keep us safe, and I'm proud of what he did. And he's had the gall to go after my
World Trade
mother.
Center came
He's
down
had the
during
gall
your
to go
brother's
after
reign.
my mother.
Remember that.
Hold on.
Let me finish. He's had the gall to go after my mother.
That's not keeping
Look, I
us
won
safe.
the lottery when I was born 63 years ago and looked up and I saw my mom. My mom is the strongest woman I know.
She should
This
be
is
running.
not about my family.
Clearly, Trump is criticizing wars in the Middle East. But the point he really emphasizes is that 9/11 was a security failure. More than anything else, Trump does not want a 9/11 style attack to happen on his watch.
Donald Trump is on the line. I mean, we know him as the man behind lots of real estate in Manhattan.
What's
and of
up,
course,
Pippin?
Donald, I understand you were actually a witness to what happened this morning.
Damn,
Well, I have a
bro.
window that looks directly at the World Trade Center, and I saw this huge explosion. I was with a group of people, and I really couldn't even believe it.
I hate that kind
And
of pop.
even, I think worse than that, for years I've looked right directly at the building. I'd see the Empire State Building in the foreground and the World Trade Center in the background, and now I'm looking at absolutely nothing. It's just gone. And it's just hard to
88,
believe.
what's up?
What does the city need to do?
Well, I guess the big thing that you really will have to do is never forget. You just can't forget that something like this happened. I was so disappointed when they closed the stock exchange, but of course, at some point, you had no choice, when they initially announced it was closing, because you want to just say, the hell with it, you're going forward, nothing's going to change. But the fact is, something has changed very dramatically.
So as much as he hates wars in the Middle East, if he thinks it's going to prevent a 9/11 style attack, That is his litmus test on when he will go to war. When you look at Cuba, Trump has to make a decision. Does he need to invade Cuba to prevent a 9/11 style attack? None of us know what intelligence information Trump is seeing, but it is possible that he is seeing information about threats from Iran and threats from Cuba that he's not even allowed to tell us about. It might be that we have to invade Cuba to strengthen America's position in preparation for World War III. There was a movie that was released in 1984 called Red Dawn. I think that everyone should watch this movie. It is about the US getting invaded during World War III. And guess where the invasion forces come from? The Soviet Union and Cuba. Cuba is a threat, and it has been a threat for a really long time. Now again, I'm not convinced that we should invade Cuba, but I'd really like to hear from you guys. What do you think? Do you think we should invade Cuba? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you like this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future videos. If you want to support independent journalism like this channel, consider signing up for a membership on my website, wolvesandfinance.com. For $6 a month, your support helps me to keep making these videos. Thank you to everyone who has signed up. I'm Zach from Wolves and Finance. Thank you for watching.
The only way Cuba's a threat to us is just because of where it sits, right? The Cuban people itself ain't a fucking threat. I hear people talking about how we're going to run out of oil. No, hell no. No, we ain't going to run out of oil. Like I said a minute ago, the reason that our fuel is so high is because other countries are outbidding us for our own supply. But at some time, I'm sure, like before we run out, the government will step in and not let them export from here. Trump's just doing that right now to try to keep the world economy stable. Let's watch the Lego thing.
We do not hate you, people of the West. We see you through the smoke of what they call progress. We have watched from across the ocean, from behind their walls. And what we see is a people who deserve better than what rules them. This is not a war cry. This is a wake-up call. Open your eyes,
Boy, they
brothers
try
and
to
sisters.
push that propaganda, don't
The
they?
hands that wave your flag are not the hands that hold you. Listen. We love Americans. We love your soul. The land of dreamers. The brave, the bold. But something sits on top of you. Dressed in your name. Spending your children's blood. Like a game. We love Americans. Oh, yes, we do. But the ones who speak for you don't speak for you. Wake up before the morning's gone.
That shit's crazy. Motherfuckers don't love Americans. They let to watch us fucking die, watch us fucking cook. I don't believe none of that shit. Let's see what old. I watched this already, but oh no, I don't know if I never
of collapse
Yeah,
and want to open the Strait of Hormuz 28th. And we have major news is a secret U.S. airfield
What's
has
up, Ford?
possibly been discovered. That is right. A second secret U.S. airfield has possibly been discovered inside Iran, and this airfield might have a very special mission or a very special purpose. On top of that, the United States of America has boarded, commandos have boarded, stormed another ship involved
Yeah, I found
with
that
the
kinda
Iranian
crazy.
blockade. Plus, we have more updates with the situation as negotiations are ongoing. So we got a lot to get into. Before we get into it, as always, guys, please make sure to like and subscribe. Totally free, cost you guys nothing at all. Huge boost to the channel. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think this secret airfield was meant for, or secret airstrip? What do you think comes next? Do we have more? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. Also, let me know if the audio still sounds good. I am still overseas. I want to make sure the audio sounds good for you guys. Hit the notification bell. All notifications turned on. You won't miss a thing. And then Instagram, David_Hookstead, X D Hookstead. That's where you can find me on social media. My DMs are wide open, or reach out with whatever you got. Now let's get into it. So I'm going to put this on the screen right away. So this comes from open source intel. So there is a report out of Iran, allegedly that Mossad operatives paved a remote asphalt road near Isfahan, reportedly to serve as a covert landing strip for U.S. aircraft and helicopters. If accurate, it would mark a striking clandestine operation deep inside Iran. Right off the bat here, before we play the video, I do want to say I find it very unlikely Mossad built this. The capabilities of Mossad, and I'm not saying this to tarnish or trash the Israelis in any sense, the United States is the best military in the world when it comes to building clandestine airstrips. How do we know that? We've done it many times in countries that the public doesn't even know about, but we certainly did in Afghanistan. In the early days of the Afghan war, we did it in Iran already. We used that to get the rescued F-15's weapon officer. And now it appears a second one has appeared. So let's watch the video near Isfahan, and then I will give you my opinion. So this is the alleged. So right here, what you're seeing on your screen here is a paved asphalt runway that has allegedly been discovered in a remote area of Iran that is not a road. Okay, this is a non-industrialized area, not an area that has regular roads and that such. They have found this asphalt strip. So if you look here, you see there are no roads whatsoever. There's just this asphalt strip. Now, sorry, what does this mean? Well, Isfahan, as many of you know, is the location of the secret enriched uranium that the United States of America is trying to secure. One of the options we have on the table is to go in a commando-style raid and secure that enriched uranium. In order to do that, you need to land big planes, C-130s, planes of that nature, helicopters. You're going to want to use asphalt due to the weight of the uranium, the fuel, the guys, the equipment, all of that stuff. So some people might say this is fake, it's misinformation, it's propaganda, whatever you want to say. However, I believe it is more likely than not that this is actually a secret U.S. airfield, because again, we have built these time and time again. We certainly have them in other places in Iran as well. Hopefully those ones haven't been discovered yet. But this, to me, is on par with what you would expect out of U.S. covert operations, U.S. Black Ops operations. Specifically, you have an Air Force unit that specializes in secretly building airfields. You have combat controllers who do this. They are experts in this. They are better than anyone in the world at doing it. What would happen here is the planes would come in, they would offload the men, the gear. They would then go into Isfahan to hunt down the highly enriched uranium. The airspace would be completely controlled with our air power. Now that it's been discovered, obviously not one that we can use. However, I have no doubt that we have more in Iran. Right here, actually, hold on, give me a second. All right, so speaking of the enriched uranium, we have some comments from Secretary of State Marco Rubio, where he pretty much indicates it is his belief that eventually Iran will get the nuke. Let's watch.
Suffice it to say that the nuclear question is the reason why we're in this in the first place. If Iran was just a radical country run by radical people, but it'd still be a problem. But they are revolutionary. There's no doubt in my mind that at some point in the future, if this radical clerical regimes remain in charge in Iran, they will decide they want a nuclear weapon.
So that is Secretary of State Marco Rubio right there, talking about how there is no doubt in his mind that the government of Iran, the hardliners, will want a nuke. That's not a crazy thing to say. Why is that not a crazy thing to say? Well, most importantly, the most important part of this is who is now in control of Iran? The IRGC. What is the IRGC? It is the most hardliner militant members of the Iranian regime. They have always said they wanted a nuke. They now have more power than they've ever had before. They've up to 1,000 pounds of near weapons grade enriched uranium. You can bet everything you have they're going to race to get a bomb. And now it appears that they have every incentive in the world to do so, which again reinforces just how serious this is. Now, in terms of negotiations, Iran's Ministry of Defense spokesman Reza Tlaib says the U.S. is no longer in a position to dictate its policies to independent nations. America should accept that it must abandon its illegal and irrational demands. So as I've said many times before, negotiations are not going well at all. At the same time, President Trump posting this on Truth Social, announcing that Iran has just informed us that they are in a state of collapse. They want us to open the Strait of the Hormuz Strait as soon as possible as they try to figure out their leadership situation, which I believe they will be able to do. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Here's the thing. The Iranians have made it clear they are not going to negotiate. They don't want to negotiate. They don't feel they have to negotiate. They think they have all the leverage. I find it hard to believe Iran is telling the president that they're, quote, in a state of collapse and want to open the Strait of Hormuz. I don't really know what President Trump's talking about here. To be quite frank, I don't believe this. I believe that this could be Iranian disinformation. Trump also could be putting out disinformation of his own. Iran doesn't want to negotiate. We shouldn't pretend otherwise. Now, at the same time, we have multiple reports that President Trump is possibly preparing for more escalation, saying President Donald Trump has told advisors he is not satisfied with Iran's latest proposal to reopen the Strait of Hormuz and end the Iran war, which calls on the United States to lift its ongoing blockade and postpone nuclear talks till after the conflict is over, according to multiple people briefed on the situation in the White House Situation Room who spoke to the New York Times. At the same time, President Trump is prepared to restart, this according to the Wall Street Journal, President Trump is prepared to restart the war if talks fail, remains doubtful over Iran's latest proposal. So multiple news outlets at this hour now reporting President Trump appears ready to restart the war if and when it comes to it. Now, next up, right here on the status of the new leader, Mojtaba Khomeini, Rubio saying we have no evidence that he is not alive, but the question between alive and in power are two different questions. So a lot of reports indicate the new supreme leader is gravely wounded, seriously wounded.
So you don't know what to believe when none
Some
of these
reports
fucking
indicate he
people-
could already be dead. We simply do not know. But Rubio saying he believes he is alive, but does not know whether or not he is in power. Now, next up here, the United States of America. Earlier today in the Arabian Sea, U.S. Marines from the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit boarded the MV Blue Star 3, a commercial ship suspected of attempting to transit to Iran in violation of the U.S. blockade of Iranian ports. U.S. forces released the vessel after conducting a search and confirming the ship's voyage would not include an Iranian port call. Let's watch the footage. The helicopter in the air. Ropes out. Obviously, that was very, very loud there. But again, the ship boardings continue. The United States continuing to keep its foot on the gas. And then right here, the Arleigh Burke class guided missile destroyer, the USS Rafael Peralta, enforces the ongoing U.S. naval blockade against Iran, escorting the Iranian flag crude oil tanker, the MT Stream, through the Arabian Sea after attempting to sail to a port to Iran. So another ship that was stopped on April 26th. Another ship stopped, the U.S. Navy continuing to keep up the pressure with the blockade. And then lastly, rare sighting of a U.S. Navy EA-18 Growler taking off from, I believe that's pronounced Malfaq Salty Air Base in Jordan. At least 8 USA Air Force tankers act for Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and the Persian Gulf. P-8 Poseidons were gathering intelligence on Iran this morning. So the United States airlift continues at full speed. We have spy planes in the air continuing to gather as much intelligence as they can in case this situation kicks off. So as of me filming this on April 28th, a secret U.S. airstrip has been found inside Iran. means it won't be used for future operations. The fact it was near Esfahan would continue to indicate that we are going to try to make some move on Esfahan here in the coming days. The United States continuing to board ships, continuing to enforce the blockade, and negotiations continue to collapse. So I will continue to monitor the situation. As always, guys, please make sure to like and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, thank you for watching. I'll see y'all next time.
I just need to make
Who
my
fucking
video,
knows?
ask who has the
Who fucking knows? I know he sounded like Iran was ready to open the strait. I went to go. I'll read the thing off Truth Social to you. Let me pull it up here. Iran has just informed us that they are in state of collapse. They want us to open the strait up as soon as possible as they try and figure out their leadership situation, which I believe they will be able to do. Thanks for your attention. Why would you even post that? You know what I mean? Fuck, we've heard you say that for days. The Chancellor of Germany thinks it's okay for Iran to have a nuclear weapon. He doesn't know what he's talking about. If Iran had a nuclear weapon, the whole world would be held hostage. I am doing something with Iran right now that other nations or presidents should have done long ago. No wonder Germany is doing so poorly, both economically and otherwise. President Trump. Yeah, here's the thing. Here's the thing. Now, you listen to Tucker and them, and they don't fucking believe in having a nuclear weapon. They don't have any uranium. And you listen to everybody else, they got uranium. Something else is going on there, I believe, Chad. I believe there's a different thing there. And I don't think Trump's going to be happy unless we're actually inside Iran. That's just my personal opinion. Now, like I say, I'm just trying to get myself up to speed with what the fuck's going on over there, because I don't know. You know what I mean? Yeah, it was all complete failure. And I'm with you on that. I don't understand why they took their foot off the fucking gas. They should have never stopped. Why would you go jump on somebody and then not beat the fuck out of them? Why would you back up and let them regroup and fuck you up? That shit doesn't make any fucking sense. Let's see what Matt was talking about. Yeah, we only know what they're sharing all this shit coming out of Iran, but nobody's got no fucking internet service over there. So how the fuck are they sharing anything? It's a lie. It's all a lie. Let me grab a Red Bull way, y'all.
Well, also, Europe is starting to get bullied and threatened by China. I kid you not. And they don't really have a response. They really can't do anything about it. Now, to kick off this segment here, I want to show you something. NATO, as of this morning, is now considering scrapping its yearly annual summits, in part to avoid potentially tense encounters with President Trump. You understand that? They don't want to have to deal with President Trump, whatever that means. So they're considering canceling their yearly summits, just saying, you know what, we're not going to do them anymore. We don't want to confront Trump anymore. We have this news also breaking, coming out this morning. The European Union has now spent an additional $32 billion on fossil fuel imports since the war with Iran began. The International Energy Agency, the IEA, is now calling the situation the biggest energy security threat in history, as far as the Europeans are concerned. Folks, this is what catastrophe looks like in Europe. This is what economic doomsday looks like in Europe. So right now, the Europeans are NATO allies. They're literally running away from President Trump because they want to keep on living in their delusional fantasy land bubble instead. So they're canceling these annual NATO summits. Meanwhile, their entire economy is literally imploding. And now, really, they're actually just starting to lash out. They're getting desperate. They're getting enraged, some of them over in Europe. In fact, I want you to take a look at what German Chancellor, a guy named Merz, had to say just this morning. The Chancellor of Germany, he's actually this morning taking personal shots, figuratively, at President Trump. Take a look at this. First off, German Chancellor Merz says Iranians are obviously stronger than many thought. That's what he looks like right there. That's perhaps not that controversial. This is. He went on to say, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz says he does not see what exit strategy the United States has in the Iran war. He warns an entire nation is being humiliated by.
Yeah, Copper Top. That I believe, because I don't think Iran's telling them that. I think Trump's advisors are telling them that, because they don't have no real way to dump all that except for by land. Now, if you think that they're not transporting oil out of there by land, you're crazy. They are definitely getting around the blockade. Now, are they up to full capacity? Absolutely not. But they have got a way around.
By the Iranian leadership, especially by these so-called Revolutionary Guards. And then he says that Iran is negotiating very skillfully and is stronger than anyone thought. Folks, he said an entire nation is being humiliated by the Iranian leadership, especially the IRGC. He's criticizing the United States of America. What he is saying is that the Iranians are negotiating skillfully, that they're far surpassing everyone's expectations, and that they have humiliated the United.
Let me say this. If Iran was hurting that bad, they'd willfully give up the uranium. Because they could get more, right? They could mine more of it. There's something that we're not being told. I'll just put it that way.
United States of America. That is what he says this morning. Meanwhile, guess what? The German economy, really the entire European economy, is absolutely in tatters. We got this report this morning. Speaking of Germany, Germany's consumer confidence has hit the lowest it's been today.
Yeah, they're not moving it out in the back. Well, the only way they're moving it is over land. They're getting it out of there.
In over 3 years. So this is what I'm talking about when I mention total European economic collapse, economic crisis, energy crisis. They're panicking.
Listen, there's people that is dedicated to smuggling fuel and stuff like that. This is way before the Iran war. I was watching how they were showing people with fucking pickup trucks and containers in the back of them and shit was smuggling fuel all over out there. Let me see if I can find some of the videos and maybe y'all understand a little better.
They're lashing out. And really, once again, this all goes back because they refused to support the United States in our endeavor to reopen the Hormuz and shut down the Iranian regime. All they had to do is say yes and oblige and be good allies, but they chose not to. And now they are getting desperate. They're getting angry. They're lashing out. They're saying things they probably should not be saying. But then over in the United Kingdom, the Brits, are actually panicking in sort of the opposite direction. Take a look. Just this morning, breaking news. United Kingdom's Prime Minister Keir Starmer.
Let me show y'all something.
Called President Trump came out this morning, telling him there's an urgent need.
This video right here was put out 2 years ago. So it doesn't have anything to do with any kind of updates now of AI trying. If you look over in the comment sections, you can see one of the comments translate to English 2 years ago, 9 months ago, 6 months ago. So this is nothing new. This is my point. Oh, Toyota. It's just the way that they've done it. You know what I mean? This is 9 years ago. 6 years ago, $5.50 a day. Oil smugglers. That's crazy.
They're not storing water, it's gasoline. In Iran, fuel is cheaper than water. But just across the border in Pakistan, it sells for a fortune. That's why smugglers risk their lives transporting fuel across the border. Using small cars to avoid attention and navigate rough terrain, they store gasoline in massive tanks near the shore before sneaking it across the border. Would you take this risk for money? Let me know in the comments. They're not storing water.
I don't know if that's true or not, but
Need. President Trump, there's an urgent need to reopen the Strait of Hormuz.
What's
Oh,
up,
you don't
Yankees?
say. Because I remember about 5 weeks ago, President Trump, and he's been doing it pretty much every single day since, Trump has been saying, listen, you guys really should help us get the Iranian regime under control. You should help us, Europe, United Kingdom, reopen the Strait of Hormuz. You should at a
and
minimum.
I'm going to tell you the reason that they don't and won't is because he didn't confide in them.
Let us use your airspace during our endeavor to open these things, which predominantly benefit you guys. You guys are more dependent on the Hormuz than we are, by the way. And they all stuck up their nose and stuck out their tongue and said, no, it's not our problem. Not our problem is what they said very defiantly. At least that's what they thought. Well, as it would turn out, it does seem to be their problem. Now, speaking of problems, Prime Minister Keir Starmer, he might have some problems domestically. In fact, this might explain why he's calling up Trump this morning, begging for help. Listen to this.
For Keir Starmer right now. You think things are bad here in the United States? Why don't you just go across the pond over to the UK? Because things are just downright atrocious over there for Keir Starmer. Just take a look here. Britain's satisfied with Keir Starmer. Overall, 18%.
Ooh.
You can't even drink or smoke anymore when you're 18%. You're below that line. That's not good. How about his own party, the voters who voted him in back in 2024? Less than 50% of Labour Party voters back in 2024 actually are satisfied with the job that Keir Starmer is doing. When less
Not
than
good.
50% of your own party voters are satisfied with what is shaken, you know you're in bad shape.
Wildly unpopular right now. How does it compare to something in American history?
Okay, so you see this 18% right here, and I just went to myself, I'm not sure I've ever seen a U.S. leader so unpopular. So I went back through the record books and I said, okay, popularity ratings, and I was like, who was the worst ever, the lowest ever? And that was George W. Bush back in 2008. He came in one poll with a 20% approval rating. Well, I got news for you. 20%'s low, but it's higher than 18%. Keir
Yes, it
Starmer
is.
is less popular right now than the least popular American president ever. He is somehow less popular. And Richard Nixon, of course, was coming in at about 24% just before he resigned office. So Keir Starmer is less popular than Richard Nixon was when he was forced out by Watergate. Keir Starmer, a very unpopular man. A lot of people want to put a lot of things in their tea when they look at Keir Starmer.
So Brits are unhappy with
People
Keir
wanna
Starmer,
put
and now he
things in their
might just be
tea.
so desperate.
Oh,
He's calling
shit.
up Trump saying, okay, what can we do? By the way, quick digression here. President Nixon, as many of you know, was actually perhaps one of the most popular presidents of all time. He might even have the biggest landslide victory in all of U.S. history. Deep state takedown conspired to shut him down. They didn't like him. Watergate, you want to talk about a deep state setup, a scandal? They've been doing it for a very long time. You got to go back to Nixon. You can go back even further. Anyway, I digress. That's unrelated. What do you say we talk about how
I
China
digress.
relates
I hate when a
to all of
motherfucker
this?
says that.
Folks,
I
I've got something that I want all of you to take a look at. We've seen the Europeans prove over the last 5, 6, 7 weeks to be very aggressive, verbally hostile to the United States. I mean, the Chancellor of Germany, Merz, he was doing it this very morning, saying that the Iranians have humiliated us. Well, let's just put this into perspective here. Coming out of Reuters this morning, they report this. Even as China has refrained from overt criticism of Donald Trump over the Iran war and signaled at once a positive meeting between the United States, President Trump, and Chinese President Xi Jinping, Beijing has quickly moved to expand its toolkit of economic pressure mechanisms aimed at Washington. It's so funny because Reuters this morning is reporting that even China is at least verbally, rhetorically proving to be less hostile than our supposed European allies. While the Europeans are insulting us and criticizing us left and right every single day, they've been doing it for months, years, really. China is still, at face value, remaining respectful. Maybe it's a better path. We also have this report. I mentioned that China is now literally bullying Europe and threatening Europe. Well, let me show you what that looks like. Coming out of the press this morning, China has officially warned the European Union not to proceed with its new Made in Europe industrial plan, threatening countermeasures if it harms Chinese companies. The proposed Industrial Accelerator Act in Europe sets strict local content requirements, such as 70% European components for electrical vehicles and batteries, plus quotas for low-carbon steel and aluminum in public projects. The European Union wants to rebuild its manufacturing base and reduce reliance on Chinese supply chains. Beijing described these rules as protectionist and discriminatory. Folks, this is China, just to be very clear, saying, hey, European Union, don't you dare even attempt to become self-reliant and autarkic. Don't you dare try to stop purchasing fewer goods from us over in China. Don't you dare try to rekindle your own domestic European manufacturing sector. If you do, we will economically punish you. We will engage in predatory aggressive economic maneuvers against you. They've been doing that to the United States for years now. We all know that. That's why President Trump, thank God we've got a good president who realizes this insane economic predacious behavior from China. Trump is cutting them off step by step, day by day. And now China says, well, we can't afford to lose Europe. So, hey, Europe, we are now threatening you. Don't you dare try to become self-sufficient in the same way that the United States has. Folks, you think China would ever say this to us? You think China, Xi Jinping, would ever say this to Trump? No, of course not, because they know the United States is powerful and that President Trump is not going to tolerate anti-American antics like this. So you can infer that if China, Xi Jinping, is saying this to Europe, what do you think the Chinese perception of Europe is? China views Europe as weak, defenseless.
You have to talk to Pimp about that now.
Believes that they can push Europe around. They can threaten them, economically extort them, whatever. Give them lopsided ultimatums because China believes that Europe won't do a damn thing about it. And you know what? Honestly, China is probably right. But now I've got something else I want you to take a look at here. As all of this is happening with China and Europe, these relationships, NATO might be imploding, the European economy is imploding. Take a look at this. The United States over in the Middle East and Iran have entered a no war, no peace standoff, with both sides betting that they can outlast each other. According to the New York Times, President Donald J. Trump has canceled envoys to travel for talks over to Pakistan, while Iran maintains it will not negotiate with the United States as long as the naval blockade remains intact. Iranian officials believe that they can endure the economic pressure, but analysts warn the prolonged stalemate could prove more dangerous than a short conflict. Meanwhile, Iran's economy, listen to this, Iran's economy is under strain, with forecasts suggesting inflation could reach 70% in a prolonged standoff with the United States and exceed 120% if fighting resumes. Ladies and gentlemen, you thought inflation under Joe Biden was bad. In 2023, it peaked at 9%. 9% inflation we had during the Biden era, during the Autopen era. We all saw, man, life became so unaffordable. 70%, 120% they are currently looking at in Iran as a consequence of President Trump's blockade. You thought 9% was bad. It was bad. Try 120. And this is all because of the leverage, the genius mastermind leverage that President Trump is building against the Iranian regime by nature of maintaining this blockade. Now, Iran, they want out. Take a listen to this, though.
And what they mean by opening the straits is, yes, the straits are opened as long as you coordinate with Iran, get our permission, or we'll blow you up and you pay us. That's not opening the straits. Those are international waterways. They cannot normalize, nor can we tolerate them trying to normalize a system in which the Iranians decide who gets to use an international waterway and how much you have to pay them to use it.
So this is now what the Iranians are bringing to the table. As of this morning, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, the Iranians floated an offer. Hey, United States, you get rid of your blockade. We will open up the strait, and then the global economy can get back underway. That's Iran's counterproposal right now. Really, as he said, what they mean when they say we're going to open the strait is that they're going to allow ships through so long as these ships are effectively agreeing to the financial extortion of the IRGC. You want to navigate your vessel through the Hormuz, you've got to pay us $2 million in cryptocurrency. That's the type of stuff we're talking about. The United States is not going to tolerate that. We are not going to tolerate the IRGC, the psychotic jihadist Iranian regime, extorting money out of civilian vessels in international waters. And I'll tell you what, we absolutely should not tolerate that, because that would be America last. We are about America first.
Jenny,
That's
we
the way
need
it
you to
should
build a
fucking be.
spacecraft. What's your plan?
It needs to be fast with blasters and wings.
That's the way it should fucking be.
Now, we've seen this deal with Donald Trump and NATO in regards to Greenland. Does this show that Trump always backs down or always chickens out, this kind of taco phrase that people are using? Or is this 4D chess? Was this a great example of the Dunroe doctrine?
I think the taco thing is wishful thinking by a bunch of Democrat Wilsonians. I mean, they don't understand a fundamental fact about Donald Trump, and biography is everything. I mean, my political risk firm, one of our secrets to success over our kind of hapless Wilsonian rivals is that we actually take history seriously, and biography is part of that. If you can figure out enough about a man, his history, and the context, you're going to figure out what's going to happen. Donald Trump is a New York property developer. New York property developers have a way of working that is different than the mannered European diplomats who have accomplished nothing over the last 2 generations. That's that you ask for the stars and you end up with the moon. Let's remember that everyone, since time began, has been criticizing Europe, for instance, about its defense spending. The elegant Obama, the most overrated politician of our era, rightly, in term paper fashion, got this right, and then accomplished nothing, being polite to Europeans and lying to them at cocktail parties. Rather, Donald Trump says, if you don't do exactly what I want, I'm leaving NATO tomorrow. Hysteria ensues in The Guardian and elsewhere. The Europeans get their act together. And then he says, well, actually, I won't leave, but you have to spend 3.5% of GDP in the near term. And, 5's the fake number, but really 3.5%. And so Europeans say, aha, he backed down. He didn't leave NATO. It's a taco. The guy just got a 3.5% commitment from Europeans while Obama accomplished sweet nothing. And this is what he does over and over and over and over again. Is that backing down or is that negotiating? That's what New York property developers do. You ask for the stars and you get the moon. And that's what he's done in Greenland. He's been hysterical. And what will he get? Some sort of deal where resources are going to be allowed to be mined by the Americans while the Danes have done nothing ever to open up the rare earths market there. They're sitting on their hands. Their newfound love for Greenland is beyond hypocrisy. There were forced sterilizations of the Inuit, as there were all over in the United States, by the way, and Canada as well. But let's not pretend they've loved the Inuit up there. This happened into the 1980s. They've done nothing to patrol their waters for the last 70 years. The United States does that at cost. So they're not managing their territory in any sort of sovereign fashion. That's a fiction that really doesn't pass the laugh test. And they've done nothing to deal with the rare earths. And so Donald Trump, going back to the Monroe Doctrine, as you put it, the Monroe Doctrine, the Trump corollary of the Roosevelt corollary of the Monroe Doctrine is what it is. And it explains what's going on with Marco Rubio in Panama. It explains what's going on in Greenland. It explains what just went on in Venezuela. It's all the same thing. in a multipolar world with the U.S. as chairman of the board, but a lot of other board members, you secure your near abroad. Powers is a wellspring that springs from your people and your neighborhood. That's how spheres of influence work. He's just thrown the Chinese out of Venezuela. They met with Maduro 3 minutes before he was captured. That made a point. He's thrown the Chinese companies out of either end of the Isthmus of Panama, a move Teddy Roosevelt would love. And now he's looking at the do-nothing Danes and saying, either you deal with us on this or we're just going to walk in and take it. And you and 3 dog sleds aren't going to stop us. Cue the hysteria. Cue the Davos man going crazy. And now we're talking about a deal that will be based either on Cyprus, where the British have bases and own the specific bits of land on Cyprus around those bases, or Guantanamo Bay, Gitmo, where there are leases that last indefinitely. It's probably the latter, could be either, where the U.S. has an indefinite lease on Cuban property, but in fact, the Cubans in theory own it, but in practice, the Americans have it in perpetuity. That will be the lease. And under the 1951 treaty, they can extend bases. So Trump can go back to his base and say, I have the sovereignty for these specific areas de facto. De jure, the Danes can feel good because after all the Europeans care about is symbolism anyway. They don't care about doing anything. So everybody's happy with that. And then somebody in The Guardian will snidely say he backed down. It's a taco where he just got leasing rights forever. He just got mineral rights without asking the Danes. He just got exposure to Golden Dome when a missile defense shield is built. He's got everything he wants and de facto has sovereignty over what he needs. Who's the winner there? While the Europeans cosplay about mattering, we care as realists about substance. And on the substance, he's done another ask for the stars, get the moon thing. And this is part of what he does. But the amazing thing is no one seems to notice.
You've talked about The Guardian there. I'm going to read a headline from the New York Times today in response to this deal with Greenland. They declare this.
Equally bad.
China wins as Trump cedes leadership of global economy. This is a quote from the article. Europe and China are in some ways natural allies in an era when the United States has adopted for a nationalist brio. Both remain officially committed to the concept of rules-based international trade, even as China is frequently accused of breaching the details. Both affirm the scientific reality of climate change whilst mobilizing investment and know-how to combat it. How do you respond?
Your business is crushing it.
What's
Unless
up,
they've got
Jake?
the right
That
help
ain't
desk
you sneaking
software.
in here. I was looking down at my phone.
I think it's just phones. Sore loser
trying to buy some
Wilsonians
shit right now.
whining is how I respond. These are people who were wrong about, let's rule the list. I run a political risk firm. We care a lot. We have a revolutionary Jeffersonian approach in the firm. We care about meritocracy. Are you right? Anyone should listen to experts. But if they're wrong about Iraq, Afghanistan, the financial crisis, Libya, the rise of China, the rise of India, the failure of the global war on terror, and where Wuhan was involved in the virus. If you're wrong about the majority of those 8 things in my office, we don't let you make coffee. All right? The New York Times has been wrong about all of that. All of that. Put all their chips on Joe Biden, who wasn't sentient, the greatest scandal of our time, when anyone with eyes could see. And I knew Joe Biden when he was sentient, by the way, and he would come to Europe. And he was annoying, but he showed up. You know, he was a vigorous guy who showed up. The guy, the doddering fool we saw there was run by his staff, as we saw. All of whom are Wilsonians, wedded, like the New York Times and The Guardian, to this failed philosophy. As I say in Europe, the reason my firm is doing well, the reason I have influence in Washington again, the reason realism is back, is because you've made such a mess of the world. And I said, I don't want to be mean in a Twittery way. I'm going to tell you what you've done wrong. And I run the list, Stephen, that I've just laid out here. The New York Times was wrong about all of that. Why would anyone listen to them about anything? But let's play their game. Let's pretend meritocracy doesn't matter, although it's the only thing that matters. In a republic, only people who are right should be promoted and people who are wrong should be demoted. That's why we have a better system than, say, believing in an absolute monarchy. That's the difference. But say I'm wrong about everything I've said, which I'm not. Let's follow the logic. And
Hey,
let's
y'all,
use
Jack
Macron,
Rabbit's gonna be
wearing
live
those
in
creepy
30 minutes.
aviator shades as an example, trying to be the third lead in Top Gun in the volleyball game. after Iceman and Mav, okay, but failing miserably there. What did Macron say? Oh my God, I've just discovered I'm a vassal. Okay, well, and I don't want to be a vassal to the Americans. That's appalling and totally unhelpful to us. So please, China, can we be a vassal to you? He's not talking about a renaissance of Europe, which would, at least Carney mentioned, we have to look inwards and make changes inwards, because the political risk, as often is the case, is us. It's in the mirror. Most states are destroyed from within, given rise and fall of the Roman Empire. Again, history, very important to know that. Instead, Macron's like, I want to retain my ridiculous safety net where you can retire at the age of 12. Totally unaffordable. I want to have 5% deficits far as the eye can see without having the American advantage, the exorbitant privilege of getting to print dollars and dominate the world. They have that. They have no military to speak of, and they've taken the serviceable Fifth Republic, which worked pretty well as de Gaulle set it up, and they've made it the bad old Fourth Republic because he was arrogant in his Davos way, didn't like losing European elections, and told the peasants to vote again. And what did they do? They voted him out. And so now we have three poles of power and no government at all. It's Fourth Republic chaos. Well done, Emmanuel. You're a genius. Again, I judge people by their results. My firm gives an award once a year called the Miracle to the most overrated statesperson of the year, named after the infamously slow Angela Merkel, who outsourced German energy policy to Russia, trade policy to China, and strategic policy to the United States, thereby emasculating her otherwise functional country. Things are what they are. Macron has failed miserably. Rather than seeing this or making changes, he says, oh my God, I just realized that the United States is dominating us and we're a vassal. Well, this happened 15 years ago, Stephen. I don't know what people are talking about. This didn't happen this morning. You don't get a do-over. We're not 8 years old playing baseball where we don't know the result. Let's just do it again. You either master history or it masters you, and it's mastered Europe and particularly France. 64 quarters of subpar growth, meaning below 1%, but not 2%. You need 2% growth in an advanced industrial country to be successful. The United States is in the 3s under Trump's terms. The first quarter doesn't count last year. It was Biden's. The last 3 quarters, well over 3%. You need 2. The European core, France, Germany, Italy, are struggling to get 1. This has happened not once, not twice, but for 64 quarters. I live in Europe and I feel like I'm on the Titanic and no one's talking about the iceberg. The iceberg is 64 quarters of non-growth. You can't run anything if you're in economic decline. And this has been apparent to anyone who,
maybe that's why they didn't fucking come help then. They may not be able to financially fund the damn any kind of war, you know? What's up, Ready Randy?
Bremer in Eurasia or New York Times
this dude does
or The Guardian, who can read numbers and work this out. This is very simple. No military spending. The United States has spent, what, $26 trillion more since 1980 than the Europeans? $26 trillion more, right? Canada has an army the size of the Alabama National Guard. I'm not saying this to be mean. These are facts, all right? This is reality.
You hear that, Carl? We'll come
so
kick
they need to
your
look
ass.
inwards at what's gone wrong. They are a vassal, but no one has made them a vassal. That's a choice. You chose not to have an army. You chose to have systems where you retire at the age of 12. You chose to have a safety net that's unaffordable. You chose to have 7 times the regulations the United States has. I'm a Jeffersonian and a Republican, Stephen. I think we have way too much regulation, and they have 7 times what we have. Germany has 5 times America's energy costs. They're not 5 times smarter than we are. And the result of this is clear. It's decline. You're going to be a vassal to somebody. That's point 1. It's not the United States doing it. It's what they've done. Second point to the lovely New York Times is, do you really want to be a vassal to China? Let's ask the Uyghurs how that's going. This is a government that's killed roughly 100 million of its people. Let's not forget the Great Leap Forward, the Cultural Revolution, and that Mao is the Ted Bundy of international relations, the single most bloodthirsty human ever to live if we're going to do a body count. And you want to be under them? Let's ask the students in Hong Kong how that's going, the Tibetans how that's going, the Uyghurs in Xinjiang province how that's going. Anyone who says that in Europe has been sitting hating America from the safety of a French cafe for far too long, because the relative dominance, the United States has lied to Europeans, telling them they're important. If anything, we haven't been hard enough. It's not that we've been too hard. That's point 2. And then point 3, rules-based order. This is a fantasy. This has always been the United States at base giving Europe the rules-based order. Europe is the bird that talks about international norms sitting on the rhino. The rhino that drives the bird are national interests, as they always have been since the Athenians and the Spartans. National interests, national wherewithal, national ability, and blood and treasure backing up foreign policy. That's always been true. Europe has chosen to live in a garden in a fantasy where it's not true. But the reality is, I feel like Colonel Jessup and A Few Good Men. I stand on the wall. I give you the very freedom you use to despise me. And you want me on that wall in places you don't talk to people about. That's what's going on here. It's never been true. Carney got that right. This has always been a fiction. All these constructs are based on power. Power in foreign policy is based on blood and treasure. The 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, the American market, which is easily the dominant one in the world. China's even falling away from the American numbers. They're now 67% of American GDP. They used to be 72%. It's gone down. They're peaking, cresting, and falling back. And the graveyard is full of people who thought the Americans were decadent and on their way out. The Kaiser thought that. Hitler thought that. Stalin thought that. Mao thought that. And here we sit. Why? The internal genius and resilience of the market is there. So every single thing in that thing is wrong. The French and the New York Times are not looking inward. You certainly don't want to be a vassal of China if you have to pick between the two. And the rules-based order is a fiction based on American power. It's like they just woke up and realized things I've been saying for 25 years. I feel like I've taken crazy pills and the world just woke up. That's how far behind these failed elites are.
You talked about European icebergs. I want to ask about some Greenlandic icebergs. Why is Greenland so important to the United States?
I think 3 basic reasons. And again, we forget the geo and geopolitics, another thing these Wilsonians don't do. Geography matters a great deal, and we've just totally taken a nap about teaching it or in America or learning it at all. If you look at a map of the Arctic, which is now becoming less melted, let's not go too far, but less melted. The Northwest Passage, the fabled Northwest Passage is now a reality. You can do that. If you look at a map, the Arctic is an area which has untapped natural resources, particularly rare earths, which drive our modern society. 90% of world's rare earths are processed in China. They're not that rare. The name is a misnomer. They're not that rare, but we just don't want to do the strip mining ecologically that you have to do to get them. And so we've decided not to. And so everyone woke up. The Chinese are behind on semiconductors. They're racing to catch up. That's a longer term and more difficult process. If they're lucky, and I don't think they will be, I think they're a peaking power. That'll take them 20 years or so. But within 10 years, the United States can ramp up and be totally independent of China. But it requires strip mining. We just did a deal with Australia, the United States, to invest in rare earths out in the Australian desert. That's great. MP, it's a company in America, is ramping up to do more. It's the only major rare earths company in the United States. It's doing more to ramp up in the United States, and there's government funding, I'm sure, on the way to help them do that at the moment. But Greenland is another source totally untapped of rare earths, particularly in the south of the country. They're rare earths. It's going to take 5 or 10 years to get them out of there. You can't just snap. It's like Venezuelan oil. You don't snap your finger and deal with 50 years of no pipelines working. It takes billions of dollars in time to do that, but it can be done. And so in, say, 5 years, we can be up and running and get these rare earths out of Greenland. There's no one magic answer. There's no one silver bullet. But this helps us greatly in avoiding dependence on China, our peer superpower competitors. So that's 1. 2, anybody who looks at a map can see Greenland is central to the Arctic geostrategically. We need that there. We don't need it being confronted by Russia and China. And in line with the Monroe Doctrine, it's part of the Western Hemisphere. This is part of what we've talked about. So that's 2. Geostrategically, it's vital for this opening region, which has vast resources internally. 3, if we're ever going to build Golden Dome and have proper missile defense, it will have to be over Greenland. Again, look at the map. Missiles from Russia would be coming over over the Arctic, and they must be shut down ahead of getting to the United States. That's the goal. So Greenland is, again, invaluable in doing so. That's incredibly important as well. So for political reasons, geopolitical reasons, resource reasons, and defense reasons, this is a vital area, and we've just taken an utter nap about our hemisphere in the United States forever. It's been since at least Franklin Roosevelt, since we took the hemisphere seriously. But in this multipolar world of spheres of influence, if you're going to look at something that actually adds value, you would do the Panama Canal, you would do Venezuela for the oil, and you would do Greenland for all the reasons I just laid out. So there's absolutely no doubt it's strategically vital, while the Danes sleep through another meal and the United States patrols the waters over Greenland at cost to us. So there has to be some sort of deal that moves this ridiculous system forward.
In response to Donald Trump's threats against Greenland, Denmark and European countries talked about sovereignty. They talked about the fact that Greenlanders didn't want to be taken over by the United States. And they talked about attacks on, Greenland's culture and nationality and the Greenlanders themselves. How do you respond to these arguments around sovereignty and, it's the people's will, the Greenlanders get to choose who rules them?
Well, let's start with sovereignty. Sovereignty means that you defend that territory. That's pretty fundamental to sovereignty. And not every state is equally sovereign. There are parts of Africa that don't control their borders. They're not sovereign. There are wars and civil war. Democratic Republic of Congo has never controlled its borders. It's not a fully sovereign country. There's a fantasy and a fiction on a map when we look at that country is as sovereign as we are. It's not. There are civil wars endemically going on. They don't control their own territory. Does Denmark really control Greenland? It hasn't policed Greenland, which is a vast area. It hasn't policed it in 70 years. The United States has done that at cost. And we haven't sent a bill to the Danes, though perhaps we should have, so that we can make sovereignty real. Sovereignty, if it's a fiction, nobody's going to take it seriously. The only people who believe in fixed boundaries are, again, the Europeans who've been given a garden to live in while the United States patrols on the wall. Have African boundaries been never changed? Of course they have. Have South African boundaries changed? Yes. Have boundaries in Asia changed? Yes. Let's look at the line of actual control between India and China, where they move all the time slightly. All right. All through history, boundaries have changed. You and I aren't talking, Stephen, about Athens and Sparta anymore. Those boundaries changed. Napoleon changed the boundaries. Everyone changed the boundaries. And the idea that they're fixed in perpetuity is part of this rules-based fiction, this Wilsonian fiction, this failed fiction that was based on American power underwriting it. And the United States is saying that's no longer real. We need these resources in real time.
Hell yeah.
And as to the Greenlanders,
I
let's
just
wait
bought
and
me a
see us
table
cash
saw
a
while you
check
bullshitting.
for what they're going to get out of the rare earths. The joke, I was just in Washington, Stephen, for a week, and I think 4 people said to me, you know what I'm doing? I'm moving to Greenland as soon as possible. Because you're going to get a check for, $1 million for a bunch of people who are Inuits and have never seen remotely that amount of money when it comes out, as they should. It's their resources. I'm all for doing that. But we will develop them, and they will benefit from them, and we will also benefit from them. The Danes benefiting, I could care less about. But let's see how noble the Greenlanders are and how they don't want to take our money when they don't have any, and we offer them $500,000 a pop when there are 30 to 50,000 people living there. I mean, it's a medium-sized American town. They're on this vast landmass where we do all the work and they get a check for $500,000. They're going to say no to the check and say, I'm loyal to the Danes who sterilized my grandmother. I just don't think this is realistic. I think this is a fantasy coming home to roost. Let's ask them when the number is real. Let's ask them when this is real. And we've had basing there, by the way, since 1951 that we're allowed to expand on. All we're doing is trying to make that basing. Donald Trump, again, is a New York property developer. He wants these bases to be, he doesn't want to lease, he wants a right to own, which is what New York property developers do. And there are a lot of advantages. How do we know Denmark won't someday do something crazy? And the example Trump gave, very good one, is up to now, the Europeans still owe Russia. They're still buying Russian oil and natural gas at a greater percentage than they are subsidizing the Ukrainian war effort. So they're paying the Russians to fight their allies in Ukraine. By my definition, that's crazy. It's at least strategically incoherent. How do we know they're not going to do something stupid with China in the future? We don't know that. Do we trust them not to behave erratically? They are behaving erratically because they're not at the table. They're just realizing they're on the menu. That's how history works. That's how realism works. All the rest of this is a false construct. But Stephen, I guarantee you, when a Greenlander gets a check for $300,000, which is more money than they've ever seen in their life, I wonder what their loyalty will be to people who sterilized their grandmother. I'm not convinced that it'll be rock solid. This is theoretical. Trump is trying to make this discussion real.
How real was the threat of U.S. military power?
I think I would put it like this. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt, one of Trump's heroes, got this right. Vague threats are best. And I wouldn't take anything off the table ever. I mean, again, I don't live in a European world where war and norms are not a reality. They are. And I would just simply say one way or the other, we need to have these resources. We are more than willing to discuss how. We are more than willing to have that discussion. But let's start at the end. We need these resources. So was the threat, I think it's New York property developer strategy. Ask for the stars and you get the moon. But ultimately, we were going to have these resources one way or the other. And hopefully now we will get them in the way that I've laid out, which I think probably will suit everyone. But if the Europeans are dumb enough to say no to some sort of deal, this crisis will be back on and quickly because we are realists. In the end, in a real way, for all the reasons I've said, we want those resources.
So Donald Trump obviously used the threat of economic tariffs to get his way in Greenland, not the military. Does that show that the United States' economic power is more important than its military power when it comes to these kind of negotiations with Europe?
It's a very good question. I mean, it's equally important. I'd say, again, the two things that really move foreign policy beyond Wilsonian New York Times Eurasia flummery are blood and treasure. And they're equally important. And you can see Donald Trump using both in the hemisphere, the $20 billion currency swap offered to Javier Milei. It's treasure, saying to the Argentinians, you get to decide what you do. But if you support a candidate that we strongly think can turn your country around, we will have a $20 billion swap if he has any problem. And if you pick another bankrupt Peronist where you default on your debts for the 8th time in 5 minutes, we won't. Which is our sovereign right. You can decide, but you need to know the consequences of that decision. That's a brilliant example of using economic might to get your way. And then Milei won an astounding victory, won 41% of the vote. He has a plurality now in the parliament. He had 3%. And by the way, our firm called that would happen. I'm very proud of that call. When he was at 3 or 4%, that he would win a plurality. The United States used its economic muscle to get what it wanted. And that is equally important. And yes, what Donald Trump has realized, again, the New York Times, The Guardian would say, and they did, Wilsonians say, the world is interdependent. Let's go have lunch. And what they mean by that is because we are dependent, we are equally interdependent, meaning we need to have multilateral institutions and the rule of law and all the things they believe in. What Donald Trump has realized is a very basic realist point. We are interdependent, but we are nowhere near equally interdependent. The United States has by far the greatest market in the world. Everyone wants access to the American market, particularly trading nations that are dependent on it, like Germany and China, want access to the American market. And so the way to get at them is to realize that you need us more than we need you. So this is good realist thinking. He gets beyond this fiction of interdependence that, while true, and while The Guardian would be clapping hysterically, while the New York Times would be nodding sagely, and while everyone at my Council on Foreign Relations would be saying, oh, yes, quite right. It's totally idiotic, and this is the point. What Donald Trump got at is the real point, which is that we are not equally dependent on each other. They are far more dependent on us than we on them. And somebody said the Danes are going to take their money and go buy Chinese bonds, and people are laughing about this. First of all, states can't tell individual investors what to do because we're not communists. There's that. Secondly, why would you give up American returns when you have them, which are far greater than anywhere else internally over the last 20 years? You're just going to give it up. You're not going to care about your shareholders. And three, if you do somehow magically get by these things, you would destroy your own economies based as it is on links to the American economy, which is central to the world. Donald Trump has realized all that. They need us more than we need them. So yes, using the economic weapon, geoeconomics, as we call it at the firm, is equally important. And in our modern world, perhaps even more important, but certainly equally important. You see the results in places like Argentina, and you see it again in Greenland. They're willing to back down. It's not that you march in and it's the 19th century and Otto von Bismarck with his spiked helmet is wandering around. What it is understanding that linkages of the world do not mean we are equally interdependent. You are more dependent on America than it is on you for any given country. When I used to have an office in Washington, we'd say, I worked at the Heritage Foundation, and we'd say that the one thing everybody who comes into my office has in common is they think they're more important to America than they are. That in the end, America is the most important piece on the puzzle. That's good, realist stuff. And Donald Trump is taking us back to the realism that founded the country. This is what Alexander Hamilton thought, George Washington thought, Teddy Roosevelt, Andrew Jackson, James Polk, all these people. This is getting back, to use a Beatles term, to American history. This isn't new, this is old, and that's why it's going to work.
It's interesting that the economic sanctions haven't worked against Russia. That seems to be far more based on the military power in that war in Ukraine. But just moving on from that, Donald Trump's foreign policy, the Dunroe Doctrine, as people are calling it, how different is that compared to the kind of post-war US foreign policy, the liberal foreign policy, and the kind of neocons of the early 2000s?
It's a radical revolutionary break. And I think it's time to realize this. My firm's been saying this for 10 years, but people are catching up. And now it's apparent because he's acting based on the policy. And from that strategic philosophy, you see the policy actions all over that we're talking about in Greenland, Venezuela, Panama, Argentina, Iran, all over the world. And the policy is fundamentally different because it puts America at the center of it. Remember, the president swears an oath not to help the world economy, not to help Davos and Davos man, not to secure the rule of law and a rules-based institution system from a bunch of Wilsonians who couldn't make their way out of whatever Four Seasons hotel they're in. That's not what he swears an oath to. It's to the people of the United States. And they've really been forgotten in all this. And that's the Jacksonian base of the party that propelled Donald Trump to victory. And Donald Trump, it's been argued, has not been very faithful to women and not been very faithful to business partners, et cetera, et cetera. The one group he's been entirely faithful to are his Jacksonian base. And that's why they cut him such slack. And that's why on a bad day, his popularity with the base of the Republican Party is over 80%. It's an extraordinary number. Yes, all the Democrats hate him, but the other piece of the puzzle is all the Republicans love him at a much higher rate than is normal for a politician in the Republican Party. Sometimes, and until recently, it's been in the lower 90s, which is an unheard of number. 92 was where it crested. It's about 87 now. But the reality is because he hews to a few basic ideas that they understand. I am here to support American national interests, first and foremost, first and last. If that helps the broader global community, that's great. And we often do, and we often hope that it will. But we are here for Americans. That's totally different than the neocons who cared about promoting democracy through the barrel of a gun, which is frankly a Trotskyite policy. And indeed, the neocons come out of a Trotsky thing. If you read Irving Kristol's book on neoconservatism, he started as a Trotskyite, and he writes clearly, I still believe in world revolution. Now it's just for democracy. But you cannot impose democracy at the barrel.
I've heard enough of this shit too. It gives me a better understanding of what Trump's doing. That's why it's important to listen to all these. You know, a lot of people, they get mad. They don't want to hear the other side of things, but you have to. You have to take information in from all over and then decipher what you believe with your, you know what I mean? Instead of just waiting on somebody to try to convince you of something, listen to both sides of the argument. Listen to everything all around and figure out what you believe, you know? All right, y'all. I'll see y'all at Jack Rabbit's. Y'all have a good afternoon. Peace.